Chapter 1276. However, it wasn't difficult for him to see her dependence on her brother. Her brother had been carefully protecting her from the start. The doting and gentle look in his eyes made the entire scene seem very loving. He was extremely envious. He really wanted to have a younger sister like her. Then, he could also dote on her, protect her, and accompany her as she grew up. This was Xianxia's ultimate dream. He thought that if he had a younger sister, he would definitely be a successful and responsible older brother. As he thought about this, the hope in his heart burned even more. He looked at Xianxia with great expectations.
It was as if he was saying, "Mommy, give birth to a younger sister."
I want a younger sister. For a moment, Xianxia felt embarrassed and helpless. She didn't know how to answer the child's question. Wuxia looked at her face and couldn't help but lean closer to her. He whispered into her ear with a devilish expression.
"What did he just say?"
I didn't hear him, she mumbled softly. However, she was going to play dumb until the end. Wuxia narrowed his eyes. This woman was obviously brushing him off. He couldn't help but feel displeased. When Xianxia couldn't see him, his large palm gently patted her buttocks. There was a hint of danger in his voice as he said, "Speak." Xianxia was so angry that she was at a loss for words. How could this man be so vile? Was he trying to take liberties with her in front of the child? Xianxia didn't see Wuxia's little movements. However, he caught the hint of anger in Xianxia's eyes when she looked at Wuxia. He said angrily, "Daddy, you're bullying Mommy again." Wuxia was speechless. This brat is so biased. His little love rival. Wuxia scolded him in his heart. It seemed that in the future, not only would he have to compete with Yu for Xianxia's affections, but even this kid would have to join the battle. As sons, they all sided with their mother. Right now, both sons were protecting their mother without exception. Wuxia could not help but feel sour in his heart. He narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but think that it would be great if he had a daughter. It was said that daughters were their father's little lovers in their previous lives. Daughters always loved to stick to their fathers. Wuxia was also looking forward to having a little princess. Speaking of which, the Mu family had always been patriarchal. In the Mu family, a mother's status depended on her son. Although some words were unpleasant to hear, the idea of valuing sons over daughters had never changed in the Mu family. A son was more precious than a daughter. Especially in a prestigious family like the Mu family, the status of having a son is different from those who have daughters. Putting everything else aside, Mu Xing's third concubine had given birth to a daughter for her first 2 pregnancies. When she was pregnant with her third child, she panicked and did a checkup to find out that it was still a daughter. Gritting her teeth, she stomped her feet and aborted the child. For the 4th time, a son finally came. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Although it was ironic, this was a common phenomenon among the noble families. Take the Song family for example. Back then, Jiang Qiming was able to join the Song family not only because of her maternal family's influence, but also because of Jiang Yishan. After Jiang Yishan married into the Mu family, the Jiang family received a lot of favors from the Mu family, and their status in the capital rose accordingly. After Jiang Qiming joined the Song family, the Song family was dissatisfied with this daughter-in-law. Chapter 1277. In the end, Song Jianghu married Jiang Qiming. When Jiang Qiming first married into the Song family, Madame Song said that she hoped that she could bear children for the family. When these words entered Jiang Qiming's ears, she felt a little upset. She felt that she had become a fertility machine after marrying into the Song family. Before she married into the family, she heard that Madame Song was famous for favoring sons over daughters. Jiang Qiming had carefully inquired about it. At that time, Madame Song said to her, "Sons and daughters are the same. They are all the blood of the Jiang family and are Zhengguo's flesh and blood. Even if you give birth to a daughter, I will still treat and love her as my precious darling." Jiang Qiming successfully got pregnant after a year of marriage with Song Jianghu. However, when the doctor told Madame Song that Jiang Qiming was pregnant with a girl, Madame Song's expression changed immediately. Jiang Qiming had secretly heard a conversation between Madame Song and Song Jianghu. Madame Song secretly blamed Jiang Qiming for not being able to bear a son and scolded her constantly. What was even more ridiculous was that Madame Song actually said at the end of this conversation, "Zhengguo, Qiming's stomach is disappointing. If she can't bear a son for the 2nd time, You should take in another concubine. The Song family can't lose its roots. There are 3 ways to be unfilial, but having no descendants is the worst. Mom still hopes to carry a grandson. From then on, Madame Song's attitude toward Jiang Qiming changed a little. When the child was born, it turned out that it was a boy. It turned out that there was a mistake in the paternity test. When Madame Song saw that she had given birth to a son, she was surprised and overjoyed. Even her attitude toward Jiang Qiming changed a little. After having Song Yunxi as a son, Jiang Qiming gave birth to Song Enya and Song Enshi one after another. In addition, Mu Yaja especially doted on Song Enya and Song Enshi, so the 2 sisters were so favored in the Song family. However, Mu Yaja did not have such old-fashioned thoughts. In his heart, he preferred daughters. When Song Enshi was just born, he carried her in his arms. The child was so small. Her wrinkled little face was red, and her 2 little hands were grabbing his fingers randomly. She held them in her mouth and nibbled on his fingers happily. When Song Enshi's eyebrows matured a little, she entered his eyes and received more love from him. Every time he held this squishy little ball in his arms, he would fantasize that he could also have a daughter like this. Small, soft, cute, beautiful, who liked to stick to him and play in his arms. Just thinking about it made him feel so happy. Unknowingly, this little princess complex is rooted in his heart. He always wanted a daughter. And sons' thoughts. This was especially so when Xianxia, with her son's protection, could not help lifting her chin and glancing at him smugly. In his eyes, it was obvious that she was flaunting. The idea of having a daughter became even more restless. Was Song's, he told her. He is 2 families of all of this Song family. This sentence made Xiaxia's face look even more familiar. This father and son pair. She simply didn't know what to say. One of them said, "Give me a sister." The other said, "Let's have a daughter." The father and son were the same. How could they have a daughter just because they wanted one? How many people wanted to have a son but ended up with a daughter? Chapter 1278. So many people hoped for a daughter, but in the end, they gave birth to a son. Some things, the more one thought about it, the harder it was for them to come. Giving birth to a son or a daughter depended on fate. You couldn't just get what you wanted. Mu Yaja lowered his gaze and sized up Xiaxia's blushing face. He couldn't help but chuckle playfully and pecked her tender cheek. "Why? You don't want to?" Xianxia said angrily. "Stop fooling around." When Mu Yichen saw the intimate scene between the 2 of them, he immediately covered his eyes shyly. However, at the same time, he didn't forget to open his fingers a little and peek through them. Mu Yaja snickered in his heart. This kid might look silly and adorable on the surface, but in reality, he could be very sly at times. The father and son looked at each other silently, their gazes secretly challenging each other. "Daddy, what were you whispering to Mommy just now?" Mu Yaja snorted coldly. His sexy lips opened and closed as he said, "It's a secret." Xiao Yichen was angry. He puffed up his cheeks and glared at him angrily. Xianxia was amused by the confrontation between the father and son. What a pair of clowns. She thought to herself, but she also found it interesting. When Mu Yichen saw Xianxia laughing secretly, he immediately looked at her with an aggrieved expression. "Mommy, Daddy is bullying me." Xianxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Mommy, hug." Xiao Yichen looked like he was going to pounce into her embrace. However, Mu Yaja suddenly leaned forward and stood in between them. He took the opportunity to pull Xianxia into his embrace. Xiao Yichen bumped into his hard back unexpectedly. He held his forehead in pain and looked up, only to see the provocation in Mu Yaja's eyes. "Xianxia." Xiao Yichen looked resentful. "Daddy, let go of my mommy. Mommy is mine. She's mine. It's mine. Mine." Xiao Yichen glared at him angrily. Mu Yaja was also unwilling to admit defeat. He held Xianxia tightly in his arms, declaring his sovereignty to her. Xianxia was completely speechless. What's going on? The father and son were actually fighting over her. Xianxia couldn't help but feel confused. "All right, you two, stop fooling around." Xianxia rebuked and reached out to pinch Mu Yaja's face. "And you, bullying Xiao Yichen, huh?" Mu Yaja grabbed her hand and pecked her fingertips. His eyes were full of love. What's wrong? Do you feel bad?
As he spoke, he leaned close to her ear and bitterly said, "Biased."
She seemed to be accusing her of being biased towards her son.
Xianxia was amused by the hidden bitterness in his eyes.
Mui Chen suddenly licked his dry lips and said pitifully, "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Xianxia immediately stood up. "Mommy will get you some water." "Okay." Xianxia nodded cutely and smiled brightly. She walked over to the cabinet and picked up the kettle. However, she realized that there was no hot water in it. Hence, she said, "I'll go make some water. Baby, be good and lie down. Don't get out of bed and walk around.
Okay.
If you want to eat fruit, Mommy will peel an apple for you when I come back."
Okay.
Xianxia smiled. Xianxia took the two kettles and left the ward. The moment the door closed, the father and son looked at each other and exchanged glances. Mui Chen suddenly leaned against the headboard of the bed slowly. He looked like an old man. Chapter 1279. Wuxia. He wondered where this kid had learned to speak in such a manner. Xianxia slowly added, "I have a wish that I need you to fulfill." Wuxia's curiosity was piqued when he heard that, so he asked, "What wish?" "Work harder. I want Mommy to give birth to a little sister for me." Xianxia spoke the truth. Wuxia couldn't help but laugh. This kid had the same thoughts as him. Xianxia had no idea what Wuxia was thinking. He casually said, "I want a little sister. Daddy, you have to work harder and fulfill my wish as soon as possible." Wuxia asked, "Is that what you said to Mommy?" "Aha." Xianxia paused for a moment before he nodded and said, "I told Mommy that I want a little sister." Wuxia muttered, Wuxia suddenly thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask, "Daddy, there's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time." Wuxia glanced at him quietly and asked, "What is it?" Xianxia chuckled and leaned forward. He smiled and asked, "Where did I come from?" Wuxia was taken aback. Whether it was a child or not, they would ask this question. Why didn't he ask this question when he was young? Xianxia noticed that he was silent for a long time and couldn't help but urge him. "Daddy, is this a difficult question? Tell me. Tell me, tell me." Wuxia glanced at him and gave him an ambiguous answer. "You came from your mommy's stomach." Xianxia furrowed his brows when he heard this. He didn't quite understand. He didn't quite understand. He knew that he came from mommy's stomach. He had seen pregnant women with big bellies before. At first, when he saw those women's bellies swollen like balloons, he was a little surprised and thought that they were sick. However, the teacher replied that the reason why those women's bellies were so big was because they were pregnant with babies. Xianxia couldn't help but feel amazed. Therefore, he also understood that when he was young, his mommy's belly must have swollen like those women. When she was pregnant with him, his mommy must have been very tired. A child's world was so pure and innocent, and their thirst for knowledge was so strong. Wuxia knew that he came from his mommy's stomach. But what he didn't understand was how he came to be in his mommy's stomach, and how he came out of her stomach. Thus he asked the question in his heart, "Daddy, then answer me. How did I get into mommy's stomach?" Wuxia pondered for a moment, then threw out a typical official response. "You'll understand when you grow up." "What?" Xianxia was very unhappy with this answer. He felt that it was perfunctory. Then, he straightened his back, arched his arms, and showed off the muscles on his arms. "Daddy, I've already grown up." Wuxia was once again speechless. Tell me, how did I get in?" Xianxia asked incessantly. Wuxia raised his brows, thought of a literary answer, and said mysteriously, "Because Daddy planted a seed in Mommy's body." Xianxia widened his eyes in surprise. "A seed?" "Yes. A seed? You and your brother are that seed." "Oh." Chapter 1280. When Xianxia returned, she saw Xianxia pestering Wuxia and asking relentlessly, Daddy, then how did you plant my brother and I into Mommy's body?" Xianxia froze on the spot when she heard that. Her face flushed red again. She was embarrassed and annoyed as she glared at Wuxia angrily. She didn't know what the father and son were secretly discussing while she wasn't around. What did he mean by planted into Mommy's body? Why did these words sound so filthy and perverted the more she listened to them? The father and son clearly didn't realize that Xianxia had pushed open the door and walked in. They were still discussing a certain sacred topic. As Wuxia peeled an apple for him, he said mysteriously, "You've been injected before, so you should know what it's like."
"Yes, I know."
Xianxia nodded his head vigorously, his face full of curiosity.
Wuxia said in a low voice, "It went in just like that."
Xianxia. Xianxia widened his eyes in disbelief, but he still didn't quite understand. "Daddy, I don't really understand. It's a needle used for injections. Could it be that Daddy also used a needle to inject the seed?" Wuxia said impatiently, "Figure it out yourself." "I understand now. Daddy, is it that syringe?"
Wuxia. Xianxia. She was really a little flustered.
"Then, how did my brother and I come out of Mommy's body?" Xianxia pestered him again, once again displaying his strong curiosity. The little guy was determined to get to the bottom of this.
Wuxia glanced at him.
"Son, can you ask some questions that are beneficial to your body and mind? Isn't this a question that's beneficial to your body and mind?" Xianxia retorted with a strange expression, leaving Wuxia speechless.
"Ahem."
Xianxia blushed. She clenched her fists and pretended to cough, instantly attracting the father and son's attention. She felt that if she didn't interrupt at the right time, who knew what this man was going to instill in his son?
Oh my God.
So embarrassing. What syringe injection? How could he answer like that? Xianxia turned his head and saw Xianxia return to the ward with 2 bottles of hot water. He immediately said enthusiastically, "Mommy, you're back." She gave him a gentle smile.
"Yes.
Mommy, come back."
Then, from the corner of her eye, she glared at Wuxia.
The latter sat calmly at the side, showing no signs of repentance. Xianxia was even angrier when she saw this. Just as she sat down, Xianxia stuck to her and asked the question that was interrupted just now. "Mommy, tell me, how did you and I come about?" Xianxia turned her head with a smile and pinched his tender little face.
"Why are you suddenly asking this question?"
"I've been thinking about this question for a long time, but I still can't figure it out. How did I come about when Daddy and Mommy got together?" Xianxia looked conflicted as he furrowed his brows. It looked like he had been troubled by this question for a long time. Wuxia looked at Xianxia with a teasing and mischievous gaze. His thin lips curled up slightly with a hint of playfulness. He also wanted to see how she would answer this question. Xianxia couldn't help but feel a little dazed. When she was young, she had asked her mother the same question. Chapter 1281. Her mother replied, "You are the product of Mommy and Daddy's love. Mommy and Daddy loved each other, and then they had you." When she reached puberty at the age of 12 or 13, she was still clueless about the relationship between men and women. Later on, she had biology classes in school. During class, she could still remember the shyness of the students when the teacher showed them the different biological structures of men and women. It was only during biology class that he realized that her arrival wasn't as simple as the crystallization of love. Hence, Xianxia explained to Xianxia, "Baby, have you seen a tadpole before?"
Xianxia nodded and said, "Yes, I have."
A tadpole is small, black, and has a long tail. It's very cute. In the beginning, you were just tadpoles in Daddy's body.
Xianxia widened his eyes in surprise.
"I'm a tadpole in Daddy's body?" As he spoke, his curious gaze landed on Wuxia, sizing him up from head to toe.
He wished his eyes could see through the man's body as he widened them so much that they could penetrate his body.
Wuxia was silent. This explanation was very good. It was very vivid. Xianxia continued to explain, "After Mommy and Daddy got together, the tadpole in Daddy's body swam and swam and swam into Mommy's body." As soon as she finished speaking, Wuxia couldn't help but chuckle. Xianxia blushed and flew into a rage out of humiliation.
She looked up and glared at him angrily.
"May I ask if you have any objections to my explanation?"
Wuxia regained his serious expression and said, "No."
Xianxia covered her face in vexation. Belatedly, she also realized that her explanation was very dirty. However, in Xianxia's eyes, this process was extremely profound. Although he did not fully understand what she was saying, his impression of her became more vivid and intuitive after listening to her words. Xianxia used a metaphor to explain to him how the tadpole swam into her body, grew into a baby, and was finally born. At the end of the question, Xianxia was still very confused.
I more or less understand everything Mommy said. NN.
Xianxia is the best.
Xianxia suddenly threw out a very thorny question.
The point is, am I not a little tadpole? What I don't understand is how I swam from Daddy's body to Mommy's body. Xianxia and Wuxia were stunned. It seemed that a child's thirst for knowledge could not be underestimated. From a certain point of view, it was extremely troublesome to answer a child's various questions perfectly. Even Mommy can't answer it? Xianxia pursed his lips and looked a little disappointed.
Xianxia blushed with shame and said, "This?" Wuxia flicked his finger at his forehead and said, "You won't understand even if I explain it to you, little idiot."
Xianxia held his forehead in pain and looked aggrieved.
He stared at Wuxia anxiously and looked very hurt.
Daddy, are you bullying me? Are you bullying me because I'm stupid?
Xianxia almost burst out laughing.
Did this child have to be so honest? He was so adorable.
Mommy, you're laughing at me too.
Xianxia complained, feeling wronged. Chapter 1282.
Xianxia smiled and poured Xianxia a glass of water before placing it on the cupboard next to his hand.
Xianxia took a sip the moment he received it.
The moment his lips came into contact with the boiling water, he exclaimed in surprise, "It's so hot."
Xianxia was shocked and quickly asked, "Are you scalded? Little idiot, can't you wait for the water to turn cold before drinking it?" Xianxia realized that his mommy seemed to be able to call him little idiot so smoothly. Was he really that stupid?
Wuxia looked into the distance with tears in his eyes. Lasagna tears.
Xianxia was like a delicate flower. He blinked innocently and acted coquettishly at Xianxia.
"It's scalded in my mouth. Mommy will blow on it." He seemed to have forgotten that during his survival training in the wild, when he was trapped in the snow with no food or water, he would directly grab the snow on the ground and stuff it into his mouth, let alone boiling water. However, when it came to Xianxia, he was no longer as imposing as before. Instead, he was as soft as a delicate flower bud, making people want to love him tenderly. Xianxia immediately cupped his face in her hands and gently blew on the corner of his scalded lips.
"You're really scalded. Baby, does it hurt?" Xianxia's heart ached.
Wuxia chillingly said, "He's not that delicate."
When Xianxia heard this, he felt even more wronged as he snuggled into Xianxia's arms. At the same time, he shot a provocative look at Wuxia. Wuxia was furious.
This brat was clearly provoking him.
Xianxia glared at him. "Why don't you try getting scalded? You only know how to make sarcastic remarks." Wuxia was speechless. That's right. Daddy only knows how to make sarcastic remarks. He doesn't care about her at all.
Humph.
Xianxia followed behind and fanned the flames. Wuxia's face turned completely cold.
It was as if a layer of snow had covered his face in the middle of winter, chilling one to the bone.
Suddenly, a series of slow footsteps came from outside the door. Then, the door of the ward was slowly pushed open. Wuxia, in his hospital gown, stood at the door. The moment the door was opened, the wind from the window blew into the huge ward and brushed against his clothes. With the wind blowing, his clothes fluttered, making him look even more frail and boneless. He narrowed his eyes slightly and looked in the direction of the hospital bed. The scene of the three people joyfully and harmoniously fell into his eyes. Wuxia looked at Xianxia unblinkingly.
He did not dare to make a sound to disturb them.
He only stood in a remote corner and watched quietly. He was content. He felt extremely guilty towards Xianxia from the bottom of his heart. This child, because of him, must have suffered a lot of grievances and hardships. If it wasn't for her, her life would have been very ordinary and peaceful. Now, however, because of him, she had suffered so much injustice. When he thought of this, he could not forgive himself. Don't even dream of getting her forgiveness. Xianxia raised his head and suddenly noticed someone standing at the door of the ward. He widened his eyes and was stunned when he saw Wuxia standing at the door. "Great Master!" he called out subconsciously. Xianxia was stunned. She could not help but follow his line of sight and look behind her. When she saw that it was Wuxia, her face turned cold in an instant. Why are you here?
His voice was cold and distant. It was obvious that he was very resistant to his arrival.
Chapter 1283.
He rubbed his hands nervously and looked at her in shame. His old and haggard face could not hide the guilt he was feeling.
I'm here to see the children. Is that okay? He asked carefully.
He had let go of all his arrogance and pride to appear so humble.
His careful probing tone was as weak as a cicada's wing.
Fear was written all over his face.
He was afraid that she would heartlessly reject him. Xianxia looked at him coldly. Her eyes flickered and she took a deep breath, but she still took a step back.
Sure. As an old man and Mu Yichen's great-grandfather, it was understandable that he wanted to come in to see the children.
She had no right to stop him. Previously, her attitude towards him was all because when she saw him, she thought of the two children whose life and death were uncertain. Her heart was filled with hatred.
If it wasn't for this foolish old man, perhaps the two children wouldn't have fallen into such a dangerous situation.
She hated his foolishness and his blindness.
She hated that because of him, her mother had passed away at a young age.
She hated that because of him, she had suffered so much.
However, now that she knew that the two children were safe, her hatred for him had more or less subsided. She was not a magnanimous person, but she knew very well that even though this old man had committed many mistakes and made many foolish choices in his life, he was, at the very least, Mu Yaja's grandfather and Mu Yichen's great-grandfather.
However, the bond of blood was difficult to erase.
Moreover, this pitiful old man had one foot in the grave.
Even if she could not forgive him, she would not blame him too much, either. Seeing her consent, Mu Sheng was startled. Leaning on his cane and supported by the nurse, he slowly walked into the ward. His footsteps were heavy and slow. Perhaps his body had reached its limit, but he did not know what was supporting his weak will.
He understood from the doctor that he did not have much time left and that his life was coming to an end. However, in his heart, there were still so many regrets that he could not let go of and so many knots that had yet to be untied.
How could he close his eyes in peace? Therefore, when he knew that he didn't have much time left, he passed the position of the family head, which symbolized the highest authority, to Mu Yaja.
He knew in his heart that he had done a lot of wrong to this grandson of his.
With so much money, it would more or less make up for the mistakes he had made earlier. The nurse helped him sit down by the bed. Mu Sheng raised his head and looked at Xiao Yichen with his cloudy eyes.
He did not speak, but his eyes were filled with relief.
Xiao Yichen, on the other hand, had complicated feelings for Mu Sheng. His impression of the old man was that he was strict, stubborn, and even paranoid. Usually, he was serious in speech and manner, and his tone was stiff. When he looked at people, his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, extremely piercing. Somehow, he felt that the old man was difficult to get close to. Hence, ever since they were young, he and Mu Sheng were indeed a little distant. Even if Mu Sheng wanted to get close to him, he would stay far away from him.
Now, however, the little guy suddenly felt that this great-grandfather of his was quite pitiful. It was an indescribable feeling, especially when he saw the old man's eyes when he looked at Xianxia. There was hope, guilt, self-blame, regret, heartache, and annoyance. Chapter 1284. Mu Sheng's arrival caused the warm atmosphere in the ward to turn cold all of a sudden. Mu Yaja looked at him and asked calmly, "Grandpa, you're not feeling well. Why did you get out of bed?" Mu Sheng sighed. The high-spirited look on his face was gone.
"I feel uncomfortable lying down all day, so I wanted to walk around. While I can still walk, I came to see the child." Xianxia was stunned, but her face remained cold and she did not say anything. These words sounded rather pitiful to the ears. Mu Yichen did not feel good when he heard this. Children were easily soft-hearted. In their naive world, they all hoped for a peaceful family and prosperity.
Although he did not like this old man's stubborn and stern look in the past, looking at him now, he found him to be rather pitiful.
In fact, he did not know about the feud between Mu Sheng and Xianxia, so he could not help but feel soft-hearted. He said softly, "Grandpa, you're not feeling well. Go back to the ward and rest." Hearing this, Mu Sheng's gloomy face was moved. His heart was filled with warmth as he said sentimentally, "Xiao Yichen, I'm here to see you. You've suffered such a serious injury. My heart aches and I want to sit and accompany you." "Grandpa, my injuries don't hurt anymore." Xiao Yichen did not seem to mind. In fact,
He was very good at enduring pain. If other children had his injuries, they would have cried and wailed, but he acted as if nothing had happened to him. After all, he had trained since he was young, and his willpower was extraordinarily tenacious. This was also the reason why Wuxia insisted on throwing him into the military camp for training when he was young. Boys should know how to endure hardships from a young age and train their willpower. Children nowadays were all spoiled and spoiled. They were too delicate. He did not want his son to be raised into a little princess. Boys should be trained. Hearing this, Wuxia smiled and gently placed his wrinkled hand on the back of his son's hand. When Grandpa Mu was young, he had been in the army. He had been on the battlefield and had also trained. His hand that had held a gun before had a thick layer of calluses on it. Now that he was old, his hand was rough and coarse. It was painful to look at. Xianxia looked at him indifferently. Her face was expressionless, and her eyes were cold. Although she felt sorry for the old man and found him to be rather pitiful, how could he not be hateful when he was pitiful? There was a saying that went like this: a pitiful person must have a hateful side. It made sense. When this old man was young, he was also a person who could summon the wind and summon the rain. With such a prominent position, he could cover the sky with one hand. Just now, in ancient times, he was also a figure of a generation of warlords, generals, ministers, and even the monarch of a country. When he was young, he was swift and decisive, but when he got older, he became muddle-headed and made some mistakes. Her impression of him was all from her mother. Selfish, foolish and cruel executioner. Other than that, there was no direct impression. However, although he wasn't the main cause of his mother's death and his brother's separation, he was a part of the reason. Hence, it was difficult for her to let go and forgive him. The pain of losing a loved one was still deeply ingrained in her heart. Although this wound had scabbed over with the passage of time, it was still unbearably painful when touched. An unintentional mistake was still a mistake. Chapter 1285. It did not mean that she could be forgiven just because it was unintentional. She was not magnanimous enough to forgive someone who had driven her mother to her death. Xianxia stood up abruptly and walked to the window. With her back facing the old man, she looked out the window. She did not want to see him even if it was just a glance. Wuxia raised his head and looked at Xianxia's cold and resolute back view. His eyes were filled with grief and helplessness. He stood up and walked to Xianxia's side. He carefully reached out his aged hand, wanting to place it on her shoulder. However, at the thought of Xianxia's cold expression when she looked at him earlier, his outstretched hand froze in midair and he slowly retracted it. Xia, turn around and let Grandpa take a good look at you, okay? He pleaded in his heart. His face was miserable and his eyes were glistening with tears. Xianxia did not move and did not turn around. His heart was filled with misery as he pleaded again and again. Grandpa knows his mistake. It's really his mistake. Grandpa really doesn't ask for your forgiveness. I only ask that you give Grandpa a chance to make it up to you. Xia. Actually, Grandpa has been so many years. With a sigh, he reached out to hold her hand. Xianxia dodged him out of the blue, causing his hand to miss her. The corner of his lips twitched, and his face was instantly filled with grief. Tears actually rolled down his cheeks at once. He was an 80-year-old man. In his life, he had always been resolute. He had always been stubborn and arrogant. He had never shown such a weak side before. In front of Wuxia and Xianxia, his face was filled with tears. He was so sad. At least give Grandpa a chance to make it up to you. Even if it's just a chance to atone for my sins, it's good enough. He pleaded again and again. His weathered voice sounded from behind her. Xia, Grandpa knows that I've done many foolish things in my life. Grandpa knows his mistake. Grandpa is really wrong. Grandpa is old and muddle-headed. That's why I took a thief as my daughter. If you can forgive Grandpa, you can call me whatever you want. Grandpa. Xianxia sucked in a deep breath of cold air and turned around abruptly. Her cold eyes pierced his body fiercely. However, she laughed mockingly and sarcastically said with an expressionless face, "You think you're qualified to call yourself my grandfather?" The old man stared at her with widened eyes in shock. "Do you know what my mother said about you?" She suddenly smiled cruelly and her face turned cold. "My mother said that you are a cruel executioner, a murderer who destroyed her life. It was you who destroyed her happiness. It was you who caused her to wander about in misery. She said that the Mu family was a dragon's lair and a tiger's den. She told me not to take a single step into it. She even said that the Mu family's Mu Shang was the cruelest and most terrifying executioner in the world. You want me to forgive you? That's a big mistake. His face turned ashen at her words as he stared at her in disbelief. The emotions in his eyes fluctuated unpredictably. From the initial shock and astonishment, to the subsequent pain and disappointment, and finally, regret and heartache. He really did not expect that Xianxia, whom he had always doted on and treated as his own, would say such cruel words. Chapter 1286. Mu Shang felt waves of pain in his chest. His heart was already in a state of failure. Now that he was agitated by Xianxia's words, he froze and found it hard to move. His face alternated between green and white as his breathing quickened. He clutched his chest tightly, his face contorting in pain. Xianxia did not know what condition he was in. She thought that the old man was pretending to be pitiful to gain her sympathy. Was it useful to pretend to be pitiful? She would never forgive him. Thinking of her mother being buried in a sea of fire, Xianxia hated him even more. She said coldly, "You leave. I don't want to see you again." Mu Shang clutched his chest and did not move. He only bit his lower lip and looked at her with a face full of pain. Xianxia sized him up and asked, "Why? You're not leaving? You're not leaving, are you?" After a pause, her lips twitched, and she said expressionlessly, "Fine. If you're not leaving, I'll leave." With that, Xianxia turned around and walked toward the door. Mu Shang finally panicked. He hurriedly reached out to pull her, but halfway through, his whole body suddenly convulsed. He stiffened and collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, Wuxia was startled. He walked forward and supported him with his strong arms. Xianxia turned her head when she heard the strange commotion, only to see the old man fainting from anger. Her face stiffened at once. Wuxia lowered his head to look at the old man with a cold face. When he raised his head and met Xianxia's startled gaze, he lightly reminded her, "The old man's health is not good." Hence, he carried the old man in his arms and hurriedly left the ward. Xianxia furrowed her brows in a daze. Without thinking much, she subconsciously followed Wuxia's footsteps. By the time they arrived, Mu Shang had already been sent to the emergency room. The door was tightly shut, and Wuxia was sitting outside with a cigarette between his fingers. He was deep in thought with a frown. She slowly walked up. She seemed to have realized that the words she had said in front of the old man were too hurtful. For a moment, she felt a little vexed. Xianxia lowered her head and leaned against him. She remained silent for a long time without saying a word. The lights in the operating theater were switched on for several hours. Wuxia was waiting outside the door. He was sitting on a bench with an icy expression on his face. Xianxia sat at the side, and both of them were silent. After what felt like a century, Wuxia suddenly said, "I used to hate him as much as you do." Mu Shang was once the man whom he hated to the core. Grandpa Mu was a traditional man. He was old-fashioned and dogmatic. He had done many things that made him gnash his teeth in anger. However, no matter how many mistakes he had made, the fortune and misfortune in his life were all related to him. His greatest fortune was to be able to meet Xianxia. If not for Mu Shang, he might have missed her in this lifetime. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, everything seemed to be destined. Because of that, his hatred had already been diluted by quite a bit. Xianxia did not understand the meaning behind his words. Just as she was stunned, the door to the operating theater suddenly opened. When the doctor saw Wuxia, he respectfully walked up to him. His tone was respectful, but his face was full of regret. Chapter 1287. Wuxia raised his eyebrows. The doctor continued, "Please prepare for his funeral. Anyway, he won't be out for more than a month. If you serve him well and take good care of him, he might be able to live a little longer." Got it. He was not surprised by this outcome. He knew very well that Mu Shang's condition was terrible. He was struggling at death's door. Every day he lived was a day less. Xianxia was secretly shocked when she heard this. She did not expect Mu Shang's condition to be so bad that they had to prepare for his funeral. She walked into the ward in a daze and sat by the bed. Looking at the sickly Mu Shang lying unconscious on the bed, her heart sank all of a sudden. A nurse suddenly rushed into the ward with something in her hand. She carefully walked up to Xianxia when she saw her sitting by the bed. "Hello, this is something the patient left behind in the operating room. Please keep it for him." "Okay." Xianxia reached out her hand in a daze. The nurse opened her palm and placed a jade pendant in her hand. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw it. This should be the patient's personal item. When he was sent to the operating room, he held it tightly in his hand. I spent a lot of effort to pry his hand off, but I didn't expect it to be a jade pendant. This jade pendant should be very important to him. With that, the nurse smiled politely and left the ward. Xianxia held the jade pendant in her hand and carefully pinched it. The jade pendant fell into two halves. She carefully picked up one of the jade pendants and scrutinized it. Her heart skipped a beat. This was her mother's relic. It was her mother's personal jade pendant. She did not expect it to be one of a pair of jade pendants. The two jade pendants were a pair. They formed a small oval jade plate and were evenly separated in the middle. Each jade pendant was in the shape of a crescent moon. They were exquisitely carved with beautiful hollow patterns and gold inlaid in the middle. One look and one could tell that they had been baptized for a few years. On the surface, they looked a little weathered, but the quality was excellent. When she was young, she didn't know much about jade. She only knew that this jade pendant was always worn by her mother. But now, this jade pendant had been separated from her for more than 10 years, and in the end, it had returned to its rightful owner and returned to her hands. Xianxia could not help but feel a little absent-minded. This jade pendant matched perfectly with the other jade pendant. Did he always carry the jade pendant with him? Even though he had fainted, he still held it tightly in his hand and refused to let go. What kind of obsession was this? Xianxia heard that Mu Sheng doted on Mu Qingqing to the core. Now that she saw it, it was true. He had even put down his noble airs and humbled himself in front of her, begging for her forgiveness. She knew how important his mother was to him. Come to think of it, he also knew that he didn't have much time left. Perhaps he had some kind of obsession and didn't want to leave this world with regrets. Xianxia furrowed her brows. Her eyes were filled with emotions and her expression was complicated. Xianxia walked to the door of the ward and saw Xianxia maintaining the same posture as she looked down at Mu Sheng, who was lying on the bed. His heart suddenly felt uncomfortable. He walked behind her, reached out his hand, and gently hugged her shoulder. "Mommy." Chapter 1288. "I heard from Daddy that Grandpa's condition isn't too good, so I'm here to visit him." Xianxia hugged him in her arms and gently kissed his forehead. Xianxia said, "Mommy, let's take a family photo when little brother comes home, okay?" He paused for a moment before adding, "Let's take a family photo with great-grandpa." Xianxia was stunned, but Muichen continued, "That's because great-grandpa told me that his biggest wish is to take a family photo while he's still alive." She was silent for a moment before her lips curled into a smile. "Okay." After 2 days of recuperation, Yun Tianyou's body had regained some of its vitality. Other than the wound on his shoulder, which was caused by the animal trap, which was a little serious, there were no other major issues. The Zhao family's funeral was over. Ever since they returned from the funeral, Li Ru had been busy. After the funeral, the family did not have much savings left. Li Ru often sat in front of the coffin with a face full of worry. In the middle of the night, she would often hold the only photo Zhao Xiangjuan had left behind and cry her eyes out. She really could not understand how a living person could pass away just like that. Zhao Linghua and Lil Pi, who were originally lively, had also become depressed, especially Lingling. Ever since she came back from the funeral, she had been sitting alone in Zhao Xiangjuan's room, hugging Zhao Xiangjuan's belongings with a dull expression. Yu got off the bed and walked to the window. Suddenly, he heard some movement. He put on a jacket and saw a few children running toward a place. "Lingling, come quickly." A child ran into the house and pulled Zhao Linghua, who was working, by the hand. She said excitedly, "Lingling, let's go and see. There are a few beautiful cars in the village. It's so rare. Let's go take a look." "No, I still have work to do." Lingling was still a little sullen. The child, however, did not allow her to explain and shouted, "You can do your work when you're back. Let's go see something rare." As she said that, she pulled Lingling and ran out of the house. Yu stood in the courtyard with his brows slightly furrowed. Vermilion Bird walked up to him and said, "Director Yun, the Mu family is here to take you back." Yu and Vermilion Bird walked out of the house. Just as they reached the entrance of the village, they saw a group of villagers crowded around it. Everyone's eyes were filled with admiration and reverence as they looked at the row of luxurious cars parked at the entrance of the village. Everyone raised their heads and kept squeezing forward, just to get a closer look at the cars that they could only see on TV and see what they looked like. To the villagers of Anyang Village, a car was a very rare thing. The villagers had never even seen an ordinary car before, let alone a Jeep or a Mercedes-Benz. It could be seen how backward Anyang Village was in the backwater. A row of cars was parked at the entrance of the village, led by a black Hummer. Its streamlined body and beautiful appearance attracted everyone's attention. The person sitting in that car must be a big boss. I've been to the city and seen cars like that. Only big bosses can afford to sit in such cars. Everyone could not hide the envy in their eyes. Chapter 1289. Especially those unmarried girls in the village. When they saw him, all of them blushed and looked at him in amazement. "Oh my God! This man is so handsome. Just like the celebrities on TV. So handsome. Who is this man? Why did he come to our village? Look. Is he looking in my direction? Don't be so smug." Wuxia was dressed in a casual suit, looking neat and tidy. One look and one could tell that he was either rich or respectable. Everyone guessed that this man must be a big boss from the city. Looking at his attire and his elegant and extraordinary temperament, it was obvious that he came from a wealthy family. How could an ordinary person have such an extraordinary temperament? Even though they were separated by a distance, the man's tall and handsome facial features, as well as his cold and noble aura, could not help but be deeply shocked even though they were dozens of meters away. There was an invisible air of nobility around this man. He was like a proud dragon that made people involuntarily submit to him. Such a person, no matter where he appeared, was like a god that could not be ignored. Zhao Linghua was also shocked by the man's handsome and tall figure. Growing up in the countryside, she had seen many dark-skinned, stocky men, but it was rare to see someone who was even more dazzling than the celebrities on TV. He was as elegant as a high and mighty prince. Ling Ling had never seen such a good-looking person. Even if it was just a glance, she could not shift her gaze away from him. Suddenly, her gaze fell on the man's face, and she could not help but frown slightly. She felt that this man's eyebrows were somewhat familiar. You. That little brother? Ling Ling was shocked. This man looked so much like little brother. Especially that pair of eyes, they were very similar. At this moment, another woman came out of the car. She was wearing a black dress. It was graceful and elegant, beautiful and refined. Although it was an ordinary dress, it made her look extremely elegant and noble. She had an elegant temperament. Everyone was shocked again. The woman in front of them seemed to be made of jade. She was exquisitely carved, delicate like a porcelain doll. Her skin was so delicate and white. Her face was flawless like white jade. Her facial features were exquisite beyond compare. She was pure and beautiful. So beautiful. This woman is really beautiful. Look at her skin. It's so white and smooth. It's as beautiful as jade. Her hair is so long and black, just like satin. Her eyes are so beautiful. Just one look and my soul is about to be taken away by them. The girls in the city are really different. They take such good care of themselves. The villagers exclaimed one after another. Some of the young ladies couldn't help but feel ashamed of their inferiority. They lowered their heads to look at their own rough hands from farm work and then looked at the woman's slender fingers. Their faces couldn't help but darken. As soon as Xianxia got out of the car, she saw the villagers gathered at the entrance of the village. She couldn't help but be startled, and then she politely smiled at them. This smile was like 100 flowers blooming. Some people even felt a little dizzy. This big sister looks really good when she smiles, just like the beautiful princess dolls on TV. Chapter 1290. A few children surrounded Xianxia and chattered, their faces full of yearning. Yu was blocked by the crowd and couldn't see what was going on at the entrance of the village. He could only hear the sounds of exclamations coming one after another. Red Sparrow followed beside him. She was afraid that the crowd would squeeze him, so she lowered her body and hugged him with one hand while using the other to push the crowd aside. Her strength was really amazing. With just a wave of her hand, A burly man was pushed aside by her as if she was a rich girl. The man almost fell over. He turned around and was about to curse when he saw Red Sparrow's cold eyes. He was so scared that he immediately shut up. Red Sparrow was very tall, at 1.8 meters, and had an extremely domineering aura. When Yu saw this scene, he thought to himself, the women of Mercenary Paradise are really different. He thought that Lisa was already amazing enough. He didn't expect Red Sparrow to be one of the top female devils in Mercenary Paradise. His valiant martial strength, coupled with his pair of ice-cold eyes, was extremely frightening. Yu. Lingling's voice suddenly came from the crowd. When she saw Yu, her eyes widened and she hurriedly called out to him. The slightly urgent shout was so abrupt in the crowd that it startled Xianxia. Yu? She seemed to have heard a child call out Yu's name. Where was Yu? Xianxia hurriedly walked toward the crowd. Wuxia grabbed her and pulled her back to his side. What's wrong? Don't walk around. Wuxia glanced at Minyu from the corner of his eyes. Why are there so many people around? Minyu broke out in a cold sweat. He turned around and looked at the crowd helplessly. As soon as his car stopped, he heard someone in the crowd shout, "The big boss of the village is here!" Not long after, the entrance was surrounded by the villagers who had heard of it. Chairman Mu, please wait for a moment. I'll go and evacuate the crowd, Minyu said and walked forward with his men. Suddenly, a commotion broke out in the crowd. As the crowd dispersed, Yu saw Wuxia and Xianxia. She was surprised and shouted, "Daddy, Mommy!" When Xianxia heard the voice, she looked in the direction of the voice. When she saw Yu in Zhu Kei's arms, her expression changed and she walked towards him with a smile. Wuxia also saw Yu. He gently pushed aside the people in front of him and walked towards Zhu Quebec. Everyone was dumbstruck. When they regained their senses, the picturesque beauty had already hugged the child tightly in her arms. The man who looked unapproachable also walked over. He reached out and took the child from the woman's arms. Only then did everyone realize that these two people were the child's parents. Everyone was surprised. What a young father and mother. This woman looked so young. She was probably in her early 20s. She was so delicate that if it weren't for her mature appearance, one would think that she was a high school student who had just graduated. Then, look at this man. It was no wonder that this child was born with such an exquisite and handsome appearance. He had an elegant and noble temperament. It turned out that he had inherited his father's deep facial features and noble temperament. Chapter 1291. As for the other ladies, they began to feel jealous of Xianxia. She was young and beautiful, had such a handsome and wealthy husband, and had such a handsome and adorable son. She could be said to be a winner in life. Why didn't they have such a good opportunity? As for the men, they looked at each other. Daddy? Mommy? It was the first time that the villagers heard such a westernized term. This person from the city was indeed different. In the main hall of the Zhao family, Li Ru sat uneasily in her seat as she looked at the man and woman in front of her, who were dressed in bright and beautiful clothes. She seemed to be a little restless. Lingling and Lil Pi were nestled next to her. They closed their mouths nervously and looked timidly at Wuxia and Xianxia who were sitting in the guest seat. Li Ru was secretly guessing their identities. Earlier on, she found out from Yu that the handsome man in front of her was his father and the beautiful woman was his mother. Li Ru was extremely surprised. She had never expected Yu's parents to be so young. Moreover, they were a perfect match and looked like aristocrats. Hence, she couldn't help but feel a little awkward sitting in front of them. She felt ashamed of her own inferiority. However, from a certain point of view, it wasn't that surprising. The first time she saw Yu, she knew that his parents wouldn't be too bad if they could give birth to such a cute and handsome child. Now that she saw them, she was really amazed. When Xianxia saw Li Ru, she knew that the simple and honest woman in front of her was the one who saved her son. She hugged her gratefully and thanked her again and again. Li Ru was trembling with fear. She didn't even dare to hold Xianxia's hand for fear of dirtying it. Xianxia didn't know what she was thinking. She held her hand and smiled gently. This made Li Ru feel an inexplicable sense of inferiority. She hurriedly welcomed them into the house. Li Ru served them tea and said carefully, "It's just plain tea. I hope you don't mind." "You're too polite." Xianxia smiled.
Li Ru's face turned even redder. She rubbed her hands on her apron and returned to her seat. However, she seemed inexplicably uneasy. Lingling suddenly said sincerely, your mother is so beautiful. The boy's lips curled into a smile when he heard that. Xianxia smiled at Lingling when she saw her hiding timidly. Seeing Xianxia smile at her, Lingling blushed and asked shyly, "Beautiful auntie, are you here to take you home?" Xianxia smiled and said, Thank you for taking care of you for the past 2 days. Today, I'm here to bring you home." Lingling suddenly felt a little reluctant to part with him. At the side, Daodu suddenly said sarcastically, "Humph! He was a jinx. If it wasn't for him, father wouldn't have died. He was the one who caused father's death." As soon as he finished speaking, the boy's expression changed. Li Ru and Lingling froze. Li Ru looked at Xiaxia's shocked expression and immediately scolded Daodu, "Don't spout nonsense." "Mother, I'm not spouting nonsense. He was the one who caused father's death." Daodu whined pitifully. "What do you mean?" Wuxia furrowed his brows and his handsome eyes flashed with a cold light. Daodu glanced at him and shrunk timidly to one side. She seemed to be extremely afraid of his cold aura. She even stuttered when she spoke. Chapter 1292. I'm not spouting nonsense. If not for this troublemaker, father wouldn't have died. As soon as she finished speaking, Daodu felt a lump in her throat. She grabbed her mother's clothes and cried sadly. Li Ru's face was full of awkwardness. Lingling, who was standing at the side, seemed to have lost all her strength at the mention of this sad matter. Her eyes reddened. Deep down, she knew that this matter had nothing to do with Yu, but if not for Yu, her father would be fine. However, she was very clear about gratitude and grudges. She did not blame him. Daodu, however, was not as clear-minded as her. Having lost her father at such a young age, she put all the blame on Yu. Yu pursed his lips and snuggled into Xiaxia's embrace. His eyelashes drooped a little forlornly. He was obviously a little sad, too. Li Ru immediately tried to smooth things over. "The child is immature and said some unruly things. Please don't take it to heart." What exactly happened? Xiaxia keenly sensed that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. She wanted to get to the bottom of it. When Li Ru heard this, she sighed but did not say anything. She did not blame Yu, but the pillar of the family had collapsed. As a widow and an orphan with 2 children, she really did not know what to do in the future. Yu had instructed Vermilion Bird to give her a sum of money. She refused to accept it no matter what. Vermilion Bird thought that he was being courteous and said that there were a few million yuan in the envelope, which included Zhao Xiangjuan's funeral expenses and some compensation. She regretfully said that a human life could not be measured by money, but at the same time, on behalf of Yun Tianyu, she conveyed that if there was anything she needed in the future, just let her know. Li Ru's tears fell the next second. It turned out that the collapse of the family's pillar in the village was not something that could be measured by money. What was the use of money? In Anyang village, the rice that every household ate was grown in their own fields, the firewood was chopped from the mountains, and the oil was obtained from the oil mill. All of this required a man to bear the responsibility. She was an orphan and a widow. Without a man to support her in the family, she would definitely be bullied. Who knew if someone would gossip behind her back? Today, as soon as she left the house, someone followed her behind and scolded her for being a jinx. Her in-laws had already spat on her because of Zhao Xiangjuan's death. Li Ru's heart was bitter. Daodu leaned against him with red eyes. She pursed her lips and didn't say anything. When Yu saw this, she couldn't bear it and whispered into Wuxia's ear, "Daddy, Uncle Zhao's death is indeed related to me. If it wasn't for me, the Zhao family wouldn't have fallen into such a miserable state. Bring them back to the capital." Wuxia frowned and looked at him. "What's going on?" "It's him." When Yu mentioned this name, the anger in her eyes could no longer be concealed. Even if he did not find out the identity of these assassins, he judged that they were most likely the pursuers sent by Mu Lianjue. It seemed that they had the intention of dying together. These people did not leave any leeway for them and did not care about life or death. If not for Zhao Xiangjuan, he might not have been able to tell whether he was dead or alive. Yu whispered in his ear and recounted what happened after he was rescued by Zhao Xiangjuan in a concise manner. Chapter 1293. This Mu Lianjue was really gutsy.
He actually dared to kill a child. He even sent out so many vicious assassins. How ruthless! How ruthless! Everyone who came from the Mu family was so ruthless. Xianxia could not hear what Yu and Mu Yaja were whispering to each other, but just by looking at the man's sullen face, she was frightened by the intimidating aura he exuded. "What's wrong?" she asked softly as she covered the back of his hand. Mu Yaja sneered inwardly. His murderous intent was boiling, but he quickly regained his composure. "Nothing," he replied. He did not want her to be involved in this matter. Mu Yaja said to Li Ru, "First of all, I'd like to express my regret about this matter. No matter what the reason is, we'll take responsibility for it. If you're willing, we'll bring you to the capital. How about it?" "The capital?" Li Ru was a little restless. "This isn't appropriate, is it? After bringing you to the capital, I'll arrange a place for you to stay and the best education for the two children." Min Yu, who was at the side, said, "Please put it down. Since Chairman Mu has put this on the table, he'll arrange the best place for you to stay. Not to mention anything else, you and the two children won't have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of your life. After all, you've done the little master a favor, so please let us repay your kindness." Lingling's eyes widened in shock when she heard this. Min Yu continued, "Forgive me for being blunt, but Chairman Mu made this arrangement because your husband passed away and the family has lost its pillar of support. He's afraid that you and the two children will be bullied, so he made this arrangement. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for the two children." Li Ru was speechless when she heard this and could only carefully accept it. Thank you, Boss Mu. However, we'll have to wait until the funeral is over before we can consider the next step. Here, I'd like to thank Boss Mu for his kindness." In the end, according to Yu Yu's decision, after Li Ru settled everything here, she would settle them down in the capital. Xianxia carried Yu Yu into the room and carefully checked his injuries. However, when she saw the wound on his shoulder caused by the animal trap, her eyes immediately turned red. She couldn't hold back her guilt and her tears fell. Yu Yu sighed helplessly. He cupped her face and carefully wiped the tears off her face. "Mommy, you're already in your 20s. Why do you still cry so much? Don't cry, okay? When you cry, my heart hurts so much that it feels numb." Xianxia did not know whether to laugh or cry at his self-righteous words. When she thought about how he got all these injuries, she pursed her lips in heartache. Holding back her tears, she grabbed his hand and slapped it twice on the back of his hand. "Yu Yu, you're naughty." "All right, it's Yu Yu who's naughty and made Mommy worry." Yu Yu's eyes curved into crescents as he looked at her dotingly. His eyes seemed to be filled with a gentle smile and were full of tenderness. Xianxia said, "You always make Mommy worry. You shouldn't have swapped places with Mommy that day." "Mommy is injured." Yu Yu said honestly, "I can't just stand by and watch Mommy get hurt." Xianxia's heart was deeply touched. Yu Yu. Chapter 1294. Yu Yu looked up at her, then jumped into her arms and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Mommy, I really love you. No matter what it is, as long as you're happy, I'm willing to do anything." Xianxia sighed in her heart. This child was so precocious and could even say such touching words. She had mixed feelings. She didn't know if she should be touched or feel complicated. She gently caressed his face. "Yu Yu, Mommy loves you too. She loves you more than life itself." Yu Yu quietly gazed at her face and asked carefully, "Then no matter what Yu Yu becomes, Mommy will still love Yu Yu?" "Yes. No matter what Yu Yu becomes, Mommy will still love Yu Yu." "That's enough." Yu Yu smiled contentedly and hugged her tightly. "Where's Xianxia? Are the wounds on your body better?" "Better. That guy's body is so strong. He can already get out of bed and jump around." However, out of consideration, she didn't bring Xianxia with her. Because of this, little Chen was probably still sulking at this moment. The family of three decided to head back to the capital after lunch. Li Ru prepared a table of sumptuous dishes. In order to entertain them, she served all kinds of fish and meat. She even slaughtered a rooster that hadn't crowed yet. The free-range chicken that they raised at home was very tender. When Xianxia and Yu Yu walked out, Mu Yaja was already seated. However, Li Ru, Lingling, and Lil P seemed a little uneasy. They sat in their seats and secretly sized up Mu Yaja's handsome side profile. Lingling carefully sized up Mu Yaja. In her heart, she was a little envious of Yu Yu. Yu Yu's father was so handsome. He sat expressionlessly on the wooden bench. His back was straight and his whole body was cold and solemn. There was an indescribable aura around him, and he exuded the aura of a famous aristocrat. Even in such a shabby and backward setting, it was difficult to conceal his noble and cold aura. Li Ru looked at him and sighed in her heart. Indeed, one could not compare with another. Some people were blessed by the heavens. After Mu Yaja sat down, Lingling and Daodu became much more restrained. He raised his hands slightly and took a sip of tea. Lingling was so scared that she didn't dare to move. She stared at him until he put down the teacup. Only then did she carefully take a sip of tea. Xianxia and Yu Yu also sat down. However, since Mu Yaja didn't say anything and didn't move his chopsticks, the others didn't dare to move. Xianxia glanced at everyone's expressions and knew that Mu Yaja's aura was too strong, causing them to tremble in fear. Hence, she said to Mu Yaja, "You seem to have scared the two children." The moment she spoke, it startled him. Mu Yaja was originally thinking about something, but after being reminded by Xianxia, he raised his head and looked at Li Ru and the two children on the table. He looked a little cautious. Xianxia smiled and said, "Sister Li, the three children are hungry. Don't just wait. Let's eat, or the dishes will get cold." Li Ru asked carefully, "Boss Mu seems to be dissatisfied with the dishes. Haha. Is it because you're used to eating luxurious food and eating exotic delicacies that you can't find any dishes to your liking in this countryside?" Chapter 1295. No, he's not a picky eater. Don't judge him by his looks. He's always been like this. He doesn't like to talk and doesn't smile. After a pause, she said helplessly, "Look, big sister Li. There's so much food on the table. It'll be a waste if we can't finish it all." With that, Xianxia glared at Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja smiled and said, "Big sister Li, don't be so busy. Let the children eat. I was just distracted. I didn't mean anything else." With that, Mu Yaja picked up a drumstick for Lingling and Lil P. Then, he picked up a few pieces of chicken and placed them in Xianxia and Yu Yu's bowls. Li Ru was flattered by Mu Yaja calling her Big Sister Li. When she saw him put the drumsticks in Lingling and Lil P's bowls, she became even more nervous. She pinched the corner of her shirt and said nervously, "Boss Mu, can you give Yu one of these drumsticks?" Lingling stared at the drumstick in her bowl. Her mouth was gluttonous. Just as she was about to pick it up with her chopsticks and take a bite, Li Ru glared at her. She immediately stopped moving and pursed her lips in embarrassment. She knew that Li Ru wanted to save the drumstick for Yu. Xianxia smiled and tried to ease the atmosphere. "Big sister Li, what are you doing? Look at how scared the children are. If the children like drumsticks, let them have them. Our Yu doesn't like drumsticks." Yu quickly added, "Auntie, I really don't like drumsticks. Let Lingling have them." "That's right. Big sister Li, let's not be so polite. You treat us as family. If you're so polite, we'll feel uncomfortable," Xianxia said helplessly. Only then did Li Ru nod and let out a few simple and honest laughs. Mu Yaja interacted with Lingling and Lil P from time to time. Although his tone was cold, his gaze was gentler. Every time Lingling spoke to him, her face would turn red. "This uncle is so handsome. Especially those eyes, they were deep and mesmerizing, with long eyelashes." When he spoke, the corners of his eyes were slightly curved, revealing a playful and devilish charm, which really made her heart jump. Li Ru was even more flattered. She had heard from the villagers that the man's appearance today was very impressive. She then recalled what the man's assistant had said to them. He had even said that they would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of their lives. Then how powerful must this man be? He must be a big boss with a good net worth. Eating at the same table as the big boss, it was inevitable that she would feel reserved. Mu Yaja took a sip of the chicken soup. Li Ru had specially stewed chicken soup for Yu. The chicken soup tasted pretty good, so Mu Yaja scooped up another spoonful and sent it into Yu's mouth. He didn't forget to carefully blow on it and dip it in. When he was sure it was cold, he fed it to him. Yu drank a mouthful happily. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. "Is it good?" "Yes. It's good. Auntie's cooking is amazing." Yu Yu was not stingy with his praise. Li Ru blushed and tried to avoid it. Mu Yaja scooped up another spoonful of soup and fed it to Yu Yu. Xianxia looked at this scene and suddenly felt a little dazed. This was probably Mu Yaja's most charming moment. When he looked at Yu Yu, the gentleness and adoration in his eyes were almost unconcealable. Chapter 1296. This man had always given her the impression that he was domineering and cold. However, at this moment, the sharpness and coldness of the past had faded from his body. When he looked at Yu Yu, he lowered his head and the tenderness in his eyes was almost overflowing. When he smiled, he was really the most charming. His sexy thin lips were slightly curved into a mesmerizing curve. Ling Ling was extremely envious. She looked at him eagerly and suddenly felt a trace of disappointment in her heart. Suddenly, a tender little hand holding a pair of chopsticks picked up a piece of vegetable and placed it in her bowl. When she looked up, she saw Yu Yu smiling and saying, "You can't just eat meat. You should eat more vegetables." His smile was so warm. It warmed her heart. Ling Ling nodded. "Okay." At this moment, the outside of the Zhao family's house was filled with people. Many people were asking about the young couple's background. After dinner, they sat and chatted for a while before Mu Yaja decided to leave. Li Ru politely asked him to stay. "Don't you want to stay for a while longer?" Mu Yaja said, "I won't take up any more of your time." "It's not a problem at all. There's no such thing." Li Ru was still enthusiastic. "Sister Li, there's still a child waiting at home," Xianxia said with a smile. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Li Ru nodded. Before leaving, she grabbed Yu Yu and stuffed the envelope into his arms. "My dear child, I can't accept this much money. Give the money to your parents and tell them that I can't accept it." She was so simple and honest that when she took out the check from the envelope and saw that it was a few million, she was immediately shocked. She even felt that the envelope was so hot. In her entire life, she had never seen a fraction of the amount on the check. However, Yu Yu pushed her hand back. "Auntie, just accept it. This is a small token of my appreciation. Just accept Daddy's goodwill." "This? Auntie, thank you, but I'm also very sorry about what happened this time. However, since Uncle is no longer around, I will take on the responsibility of taking care of you," Yu Yu said obediently. Li Ru's heart warmed and she was touched. Tears welled up in her eyes and her lips trembled, but she couldn't say anything in the end. When they left, Li Ru followed behind the car for some distance. Ling Ling followed beside her and kept waving at Yu Yu. Yu Yu leaned against the car window and looked out. She smiled and waved. Yu Yu returned to her seat and hugged Xianxia's arm. Satisfaction and anticipation appeared on her face. How wonderful! He was finally home. At that moment, it was as if a beam of sunlight had shone into her heart, bright and warm. When they got home, Xianxia heard the sound of a car horn. He stood at the entrance of the villa and stood on his tiptoes to look around. The car came to a steady stop at the entrance. The moment Yu Yu got out of the car, Muichen saw him and immediately pounced on him excitedly, hugging him tightly in his arms. He hugged Yu Yu so tightly, as if he was afraid that he would lose a precious treasure again. He hugged Yu Yu tightly in his arms. Everything seemed so unreal, as if it was a dream. However, when he felt the real warmth from Yu Yu's body, Muichen finally believed that it wasn't a dream. "Yu Yu, you're home. I've been waiting for you." Muichen felt guilty. He hadn't been able to lead the rescue team to the scene in time. Chapter 1297. Muichen had always been strong. Even when he was seriously injured, he did not shed a single tear. However, when he held Yu Yu in his arms, Muichen's eyes welled up. He could not help but tear up. "From now on, let's not be separated anymore," Muichen said solemnly. Yu Yu was almost suffocated by his tight embrace. "Brother, be gentler. You're hurting me," Yu Yu said helplessly. "Okay." Muichen loosened his arms. Before Yu Yu could catch his breath, Muichen hugged him tightly again. "Yu Yu, I promise to protect you. It's all my fault that you're injured so badly this time." "Brother, are you blaming me?" "You're hurting my wound," he reminded him weakly. Muichen was shocked and quickly let go of him. Yu Yu glanced at his flustered expression and could not help but burst out laughing. Mu Yichen's face froze and he asked with a strange expression, "What are you laughing at?"
"Brother, I realized that you're so funny."
Yu covered her mouth and giggled.
"What do you mean?" "It's so mushy," Yu said.
Mu Yichen smacked his lips and his heart turned cold. Yu touched his hair helplessly.
"Good boy. Didn't I go home?" Mu Yichen's face turned red strangely.
However, he was greedy for the warmth of Yu's palm and smiled.
Xianxia and Mu Yaja walked over. When they saw the affectionate look on the two little guys' faces, they looked at each other.
"Why are you so lovey-dovey?"
Xianxia couldn't help but tease. She felt gratified to see that the two little guys had such a good relationship. He could still remember how Yu had rejected Mu Yichen when the two of them had first met. They were not close to each other at all. Now that the relationship between the two brothers was so good, she felt a lot more relieved.
Yu could only rub his forehead helplessly at her teasing.
However, he heard Xianxia say, "Xiaoyichen, you look like a woman in ancient times who longed for her husband to come home."
Mu Yaja added, "The Amma Stone."
Xianxia immediately agreed, "Yes, the Amma Stone." Xiaoyichen didn't know what the Amma Rock was. Yu, who was standing at the side, understood. Her face froze for a moment and she said angrily, "Mommy!"
He pouted and pretended to be angry.
Xiaoyichen didn't understand. Yu, what does Mommy mean by the Amma Stone?" Yu said seriously, "You don't understand. Don't ask." Mu Yichen pouted dejectedly. Xianxia was even more amused. She went forward and hugged the two children. These two babies were so funny. She secretly laughed in her heart and couldn't help but reach out to scratch Mu Yichen's nose. Yu and Mu Yichen looked at each other and smiled. When they got home, Xianxia specially cooked a sumptuous dinner for the two children. She hadn't cooked for a long time, so her culinary skills were a little rusty. Naturally, she couldn't compare to Yu's culinary skills. However, she put in a lot of effort, and the taste was not bad. Compared to before, her culinary skills had improved. Mu Yichen was full of expectations for Xianxia's culinary skills. When the dishes were served on the table, he couldn't wait to taste them. Then, he raised his eyebrows in approval.
"Mommy's culinary skills are amazing."
"Really? Then eat more." Xianxia was encouraged. Mu Yaja, who was standing at the side, didn't hold back and said, "It's just passable." Chapter 1298. Upon hearing that, Yu crossed his arms in dissatisfaction and glared at him. "Daddy, I'll give you another chance to re-evaluate this."
The threat in his eyes was indescribable. Mu Yaja replied without batting an eyelid, "It's not bad."
Xianxia, Mu Yichen. Yu felt much better upon hearing that, and his expression softened a little. He held the bowl in his hands. The rice in the bowl was warm and tasty. He suddenly felt that this happiness was not easy to come by. It was probably because he had gone through hardships that he knew how precious a peaceful happiness was. After dinner, Mu Yichen pulled Yu to his room. He had a lot of questions to ask him. Yu gave him a brief overview of what had happened in the past 2 days. Mu Yichen, on the other hand, was shocked by what he heard. When he learned that Mu Lianjue had sent people to hunt him down, he clenched his fists in anger. That Mu Lianjue is too despicable. He's just like a clown. He probably knows that he's lost, so he needs to jump around a little before he can feel at ease.
Yu snorted coldly.
D***. Mu Yichen was so angry that he was at a loss for words. He could not wait to tear him into pieces with his own hands. Yu dialed Li Hanlin's number. When the call got through, the latter thanked the heavens and expressed his relief when he learned that he had returned home. "Director Yun, you're back. I was so worried." Li Hanlin was really scared out of his wits by what had happened to him. Yu replied faintly, "I've troubled you with a lot of things during my absence." "Director Yun, these are all part of my job. There's no trouble at all." After a pause, Li Hanlin probed cautiously, "Director Yun, is it convenient for you to make a trip to the office now?" "Why?" "There's something urgent waiting for you to settle." "It's not convenient for me now." "Ugh." Yu frowned slightly. Judging from Li Hanlin's tone, it seemed like there was indeed something important. He thought for a moment and decided to make a trip to the company. Hence, he went to look for Mu Yaja and bluntly explained the reason. "Daddy, I'm going to the company. I need you to cover for me, okay? He asked. Mu Yaja frowned. You've just returned home and you're still injured. What are you planning to do? Something important. Yu emphasized. But, I don't want mommy to know about my identity for the time being. So, if necessary, I need you to cover for me. Mu Yaja pondered for a moment. Alright. I'll send you to the entrance of the company, but it can't take too long. Alright. Hence, Mu Yaja covered up for Yu. He said that the child had returned and was craving for desserts from the famous shop in the city center. Xianxia wanted to go with him. However, Mu Yaja asked her to stay at home and accompany Xianxia. Xianxia was still injured and needed to rest. He could not move around too much, so Xianxia agreed. Mu Yaja successfully covered for him and sent him to Laji's headquarters. Yu asked him to wait for him outside the company and to call him when he arrived. Mu Yaja smiled and teased. Can't I enter your company? Director Yun? Of course. After all, there are some business secrets that I can't let you know. Yu pretended to be arrogant and crossed his arms. Mu Yaja ruffled his hair. Go ahead. I'll wait for your call. Okay. Chapter 1299. As soon as Yu entered the office, he saw Gong Jie standing in front of the window. He was wearing a snow-white military suit, which made him look tall and slender. He stood in front of the window expressionlessly with a cigar in his hand. He seemed to have been waiting for him for a long time. Li Hanlin saw him and went up to him. President Yun, you're here. Yes, what's the matter? Yu asked. Li Hanlin raised his head with a complicated expression and looked in the direction of Gong Jie. Yu followed his line of sight and looked at Gong Jie. He asked in a deep voice, Young Master Gong, you're looking for me? Gong Jie turned around, but his face was gloomy. He looked at Yu with a pair of deep, unfathomable eyes. You're back. Yes. Yu smiled and sat down on the sofa. Young Master Gong, your subordinates made a lot of mistakes in this operation. Gong Jie's expression changed. They weren't careful enough and made some mistakes. I suffered a little. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me? Gong Jie asked, how do you want me to compensate you? Assign that vermilion bird of yours to me. The moment the boy opened his mouth, he laid out a shocking condition. Zhuke? The man tugged at his lips and asked nonchalantly, why? Have you taken a liking to her? Yes. Yu said bluntly. Other than her, give me another secret guard. What do you think of this condition? He had a motive for making such a request. With Lisa by his side, his safety was guaranteed. However, he had to find a way to arrange a secret guard to protect his mommy when necessary. After all, he didn't want something like this to happen a second time. The mercenaries of Mercenary Paradise were of high quality. Ordinary soldiers from the army couldn't compare to them. They were all assassins who walked in the dark and had outstanding martial arts skills. Naturally, he couldn't be at ease with them protecting his mommy. Therefore, he proposed such a condition to Gong Jie. Gong Jie smiled. Regarding his request, he was straightforward. Since you asked me for the person, I have no reason to refuse. From now on, Vermilion Bird and Injie will be at your disposal. All right. After a pause, Yu asked, where's Lisa? Gong Jie said, are you concerned about her? Ask her about her situation. Gong Jie's lips curled into a cold smile. He said expressionlessly, she's just a bodyguard. Even if she's dead, you don't have to ask anything. She died? Gong Jie said coldly, not dead. It's just a small injury, it won't take her life. Yu frowned. Why are you looking for me? Gong Jie raised his eyebrows and suddenly walked to the poster. His gaze fell on the poster hanging on the wall. His thin lips escaped from his thin lips. Who is this woman? Yu was shocked. His gaze fell on the poster as well. It was the poster he had chosen when Xianxia was filming. He felt that this poster was especially beautiful and elegant. Just looking at it was pleasing to the eye. Therefore, he chose this poster and enlarged it to make it into a poster. He hung it on the wall, facing his desk. When he raised his head, he happened to be able to see this pictorial, which made him feel at ease. When he heard Gong Jie's question, he became suspicious. He frowned slightly and was a little wary. Why are you asking about this? I'm just asking. Chapter 1300. He stared at Yu Yu for a long time before slowly approaching him and squatting down in front of him. His gaze never left Yu Yu's small face. His facial features and eyes were very similar to the woman in the poster. He had his suspicions when he first saw Yu Yu. However, thinking that it might just be a coincidence, he did not think too much about it. It was only when he saw the huge poster hanging on the wall in Yun Tianyou's office that he became suspicious. The woman in the poster had such similar facial features and gentle eyes. It was as if they were the same as the shadow in his memory. This woman and the little lad should have some sort of relationship. If not, why would he hang this woman's poster in his office? What was more suspicious was that the little lad's facial features were very similar to this woman's. They looked like mother and son. Could it be that this woman was his? Gong Jie was so agitated that his shoulders and fingertips could not help but tremble. He suddenly held Yu Yu's face and caressed every inch of his face with his slender fingers. A complicated look appeared on his face. Actually, when I first met you, I vaguely suspected your identity. Gong Jie said this firmly. He slowly raised his eyes and met Yun Tianyou's startled gaze. What suspicion? Don't you think that you and I look alike? Gong Jie raised a brow and his thin lips parted as he asked this. Yu Yu's gaze landed on his face again. It was more than similar. Yu Yu was extremely sensitive. Hence, when he first met Gong Jie, he had some suspicions. However, at that time, he was thinking about his mommy's matter and did not think much about it. He heard that his mommy had a younger brother who was in a car accident and disappeared without a trace. No one knew if he was dead or alive. Now, the man standing in front of him looked so similar to his mommy. It was hard for Yu Yu not to think about it. However, compared to Gong Jie, his attitude was more conservative. Indeed, there are some similarities, but what are you trying to say? He did not go straight to the point and tell him the identity of the person in the poster. His mommy's identity was sensitive. Moreover, the man standing in front of him was a core member of the Hurricane Group, the #1 mercenary empire. He was a very dangerous person. What if he was not? Without confirmation, he would not reveal his mommy's identity to him or anyone else. This was his protective measure for his mommy. Gong Jie sized him up. With him. He was eager to verify, but he was afraid of being disappointed again. However, with a little bit of hope in his heart, he casually said, I'm looking for someone. Yu Yu was slightly taken aback. A woman. At the mention of this person, there was a rare tenderness in his usually cold and unruly eyes. Although I don't know if I'll be able to find her in this lifetime, I don't want to give up on any hope, regardless of whether she's dead or alive. She is very important to me. A woman? Yu Yu asked tentatively. Chapter 1301. Although someone told me that she's already dead, I don't believe it. There seemed to be a faint bond between bloodlines. Some people said that blood was thicker than water. Twins would form a bond similar to telepathy. Back then, he was told that his sister had died in a car accident. By the time he woke up, he was already taken away by the Hurricane Group. That was the first time he met his biological father, Gong Xiaoying. His father told him that when the people from the Hurricane Group took him away from the hospital, his sister had already been declared dead. The doctor said that she showed signs of dying on the way to the hospital. Her heartbeat was already gone by the time they reached the hospital. They did a series of emergency treatments, but it was too late. Gong Jie could not believe it and was downcast for a while. His sixth sense was telling him that his sister was still alive. He had also met a woman who looked like him. However, after further verification, the final result was disappointing. Gradually, he began to believe that his sister was no longer in this world. However, when he saw the huge poster in Yun Tianyou's office, his heart seemed to have sensed something and was filled with hope again. Yu Yu was silent for a while before he made up his mind and slowly explained, the woman in the poster is a celebrity. Celebrity. Gong Jie was stunned. What's your relationship with her? If you must ask what kind of relationship they have, Yu Yu's face instantly revealed a fanboy's expression. I'm her little fan. Gong Jie was silent. Li Hanlin, who was standing at the side, was speechless. Just a fan? That's all. Gong Jie stared at him suspiciously. Yu Yu gave him an elegant smile, hiding his thoughts well. If the person you're looking for is her, I can use my connections to investigate her identity for you.
Gong Jie coldly said. No need. If that was the case, he would send someone to investigate. With that, he stood up abruptly and strode off. Yu watched him leave expressionlessly with a frown. Agent Li, he called out. Li Hanlin walked to his side and squatted slightly. Director Yun, what are your orders? Lock down everything. Don't let him find out anything about my mommy. Why? Li Hanlin was suddenly suspicious. Why do you want to hide her identity from young Master Gong? Yu faintly answered, because before I can confirm his relationship with my mommy, I won't let him get close to her. I don't understand your intention. Yu squinted at him. Understood. But if it's proven that my mommy is the person he's been looking for, then it's a different story. Li Hanlin was curious. How do you prove it? Yu turned around with a smile on his face. He looked at Li Hanlin and suddenly raised his hand. Between his fingers was a strand of silver hair. This was what he had stolen from the man's head while the latter was in a daze earlier. Take it and do a DNA paternity test. Let me know when the results are out. Yes. Chapter 1302. When Wuxia and Yu returned home, Xianxia was already asleep. Unforgettable was in the flower bed, holding a pair of scissors in one hand as she trimmed the flowers. The sky was gradually turning dark. In the evening, she was half squatting by the flower bed. She held the flower bed with one hand and gently fiddled with it, trimming away the sparse branches from time to time. The injuries on her body had not healed yet. The corners of her lips were a little disfigured, but she was pursing her thin lips. Apart from being serious, her clear and beautiful face shone with a jade-like radiance. It was as if everything had been peaceful over the years. Most of the time, this woman was as beautiful as a flower, but her beauty was not ostentatious. Most of the time, she breathed quietly and lived quietly. She was so quiet that she was like a cat that had restrained its claws and arrogance. She was quietly nestled in a corner, as if she was aloof from worldly affairs. In her tranquility, she had restrained all her sharpness. Wuxia leaned against the door and watched her silently. She did not seem to notice his presence and was focused on studying the flowers. Wuxia slowly walked toward her. Unforgettable suddenly sensed the footsteps behind her. She looked up and saw Wuxia hugging her waist from behind. His movements were very gentle as he pulled her into his embrace. Caught off guard, the scissors fell to the ground. Yu stood at the door and watched for a while. The corners of his lips curled into a gentle smile before he walked away quietly. Unforgettable was a little shocked by his sudden appearance. She looked up and could not help but glare at him angrily. You only know how to scare people? She glared at him with some dissatisfaction. She bit her lip and suddenly smiled gently. Even her eyes were like water, making his heart skip a beat. Wuxia could not help but lower his head and give her a light peck. In this beautiful flower bed, the faint fragrance in the air captured her sweet breath. Amidst the beautiful flowers, he held her gently in his arms. His large palm gently caressed her face and rubbed her eyelids. Wuxia lowered his eyes and looked at her. As he narrowed his eyes, his thick and long eyelashes fell into her eyes. The poignant night gave birth to some warmth and charm. He caressed her face and began to kiss her gently. His thin lips were pressed tightly against her tender red mouth, gently rubbing against it. However, he was not in a hurry to enter. Instead, he lingered on her pink lips more often. The soft texture like a jelly made him a little lost in this gentle whirlpool. He kissed her even more deeply and with more strength. The woman in his arms was like a budding rose, slowly blooming. A beautiful fragrance could be smelled with a light sniff. His slender fingers lifted a strand of her hair. He closed his eyes and pushed the kiss even deeper. Unforgettable was a little nervous. In a low voice she muttered, "Don't, the children are here." If the two children saw this intimate scene, she would feel quite embarrassed. Wuxia harumphed. "The children are tired. They're all asleep." He hugged her body with his hand and started to touch her body gently. Then, he could not help but harumph. "Why have you lost weight again?" She had lost so much weight. During the few days in the hospital, she ate very little. Moreover, this woman seemed to have a thin physique. No matter how much she was fed, it was hard for her to gain more than a few pounds. But the speed at which she lost weight was very fast. He was a little dissatisfied. This woman was too thin.
It was not good. Chapter 1303. Xianxia pouted and felt a little wronged. I've lost a little weight these days. But it's just as well. I won't have to lose weight when I'm filming a new drama soon. The camera would always magnify a person's size. Therefore, many celebrities would starve a few meals a few days before they went on screen to maintain their beautiful image in front of the camera. When she was filming The Green Apple, she gained a few kilograms for a few days. Jianghu ordered her to go on a diet and forced her to lose 3 kilograms in 2 days. Only then would she look good on screen. Wuxia was displeased. You don't have to lose weight. Gain some weight and your figure will be just right. But, with my physique, I don't seem to be more than 50 kilograms when I was at my fattest, Xianxia said gloomily. With her height of 1.65 meters, 50 kilograms could only be considered just right. Now, she was only slightly more than 90 kilograms. She was indeed a little too thin. Wuxia couldn't help but pinch her face a little harder. Xianxia slapped his hand away. It hurts. As soon as she said that, she yawned and felt sleepy. She seemed to be a little sleepy. Sleepy? He frowned and asked. Xianxia nodded. Then, let's sleep together. Xianxia nodded. However, in the next second, she was lifted up by Wuxia. Before she could react, she was carried in his arms like a princess. Wuxia looked at the woman in his arms and smiled elegantly. My wife, it's late. It's time to rest. Xianxia pursed her lips and smiled. She couldn't help but say, Who's your wife? She widened her eyes, which were full of anger. Her charming eyes were like silk, and her innocent look was extremely seductive. He couldn't help but lower his head and cover her lips again. He was reluctant to part with her. This time, she didn't dodge. Instead, she met his warm kiss head-on. She naturally wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him slowly. She mischievously used the tip of her tongue to trace the seam of his lips. Wuxia opened his mouth and sucked in a wisp of her spiritual fragrance. As they intertwined, his body gradually reacted. Xianxia smiled playfully. Unexpectedly, she reached out her hand and gently touched a certain sensitive area on his body. Then she pulled it away. She bit her lip and smiled. In her smile, there was a bit of slyness, a bit of charm, and a bit of playfulness. A strange shade of red flashed across Wuxia's face. He looked up and glared at her. How dare this woman provoke him? If she did that, she would easily get into trouble. He suspected that her actions were a silent invitation to him. Wuxia narrowed his eyes and bit her earlobe gently as a punishment. He whispered into her ear, Woman, are you playing with fire? In a way, this was also a form of initiative. A hint of panic flashed through Xianxia's eyes, and then she stammered, No. Then what were you doing? Xianxia was a little shy under his teasing gaze. Just now, she had only done it on a whim. Now, she was a little regretful. She covered her face in shame and stammered, I just wanted to test if your shaft was hard or not. She was acting shy. Wuxia smiled wickedly. Sometimes, this woman could be quite adorable. He lowered his voice and bit her ear. If you want to test, you can't test it like this. Chapter 1304. Xianxia peeked at him through the gaps between her fingers and covered her face in embarrassment. She felt a little embarrassing. Wuxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry at first. Then, he carried her back to the bedroom and carefully placed her on the bed. Concerned about the wounds on her body that hadn't healed yet, his movements were very careful, as if he was treating a precious and fragile object. In the next second, he took off her clothes. Xianxia immediately reached out to stop him. He said in a low voice, Don't move. She really didn't dare to move. Until he took off her outerwear, leaving only her cute and sexy underwear. Then, his tall body pressed down on her. He placed it on her body, but deliberately lightened the weight. Even so, Xianxia still pushed him away in embarrassment. Wuxia, you're so heavy. A height of 1.88 meters and a weight of more than 70 kilograms was a very heavy weight to her. Wuxia smiled mischievously. Then, he reached out and hugged her. With a flip of his body, he switched positions with her and helped her sit on top of him. With this, Xianxia sat on top of him in a seductive position. Xianxia smiled sweetly. With a slight twist of her body,
The straps on her bright and beautiful body slid down from her shoulders. When her clothes were half removed, that beautiful scene came into his view. Wuxia reached out and just happened to be able to grasp that pair of plump jade bunnies. Xianxia sensitively reached out and grabbed his hand. Then, he held her hand in reverse and guided it to a certain spot. The moment her fingertips touched something hot, she was shocked and immediately retracted her hand. Why? Who was the one who said that she wanted to try it? He grabbed her hand again and smiled mischievously. His deep eyes revealed some hidden meaning. You weren't at your best just now. Now, try it again. How does it feel? Those words really made one's heart skip a beat. She blushed at his teasing. She pursed her lips in shyness as her cheeks blushed a few shades of pink. It was just a teasing remark. Did he actually take it seriously? She was only joking, that's why she said that. No matter how bold she was, she wouldn't dare to play with fire on him. Hey, you're not allowed to go overboard. She mumbled softly as a warning to him. However, the man didn't think much of it and looked at her leisurely like an ancient overlord. He asked her casually, "Who's the one who's going overboard?" "It's you." She slapped his hand away and chuckled. "Let go of me." But her face. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze, and snorted in displeasure. "You're the one who provoked me first. I didn't want to touch you during this period of time. But now, you're in the wrong. Now that you're the one who started it, shouldn't you be responsible for extinguishing it?" Xianxia pouted disapprovingly and raised her eyebrows. "Humph, it's more like I'm the one who's going to destroy you." "Destroy me? This woman. She's got guts." She actually wanted to destroy him. Wuxia curled his lips and kissed her perky butt. He kneaded it gently. This feeling was just right, but it made his brows relax slightly. He wanted to see who would be the one to destroy who. "Sure, why don't you give it a try?" Chapter 1305. Xianxia reached out to grab his careless hand. With a charming smile on her face, she looked like a seductive vixen. What greeted his eyes was a seductive scene. "All right, stop fooling around. Sleep with me, okay?" She leaned over and laid on his body, hugging his shoulders and acting coquettishly. She was a little tired and wanted to rest. Unfortunately, his restless hands continued to roam all over her body, igniting a fire. It caused her body to react a little. Xianxia became increasingly frustrated and couldn't help pinching his face. Wuxia took a step further and asked, "How are we going to sleep?" "Hey." Xianxia glared at him and rebuked, "Wuxia, can you be more serious?" However, the man hooked his arm around her jade-like neck and rubbed his lips against her ear. "Am I not serious enough? How do you want me to be serious then? Tell me." "Sleep with me obediently." Xianxia pressed his restless hand down and said, "Today, I really can't." The man raised a brow meaningfully as if he was deliberately teasing her. "Why can't I?" Xianxia was stunned. Seeing him chuckle softly as if he was teasing her, she instantly blushed. What a meaningful question. She pouted softly and coquettishly. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have ignited the fire. Spare me, okay?" "If you want me to spare you, sure." Wuxia pinched her cheeks and said seductively, "Say something nice, Call her something nice? Xianxia racked her brains. "Yaxia? It doesn't sound nice," she said softly again. "Sheh." The man snorted. "It doesn't sound nice." Xianxia's face fell. She looked at him with some frustration and pursed her lips. For a moment, she didn't know what he wanted to hear. "My dear husband." "No. Not today." "Why not?" "I won't give you another chance if you can't call out something nice." He snorted coldly and grabbed her by the throat. Then, he reached his hand between her legs. Xianxia cried out in surprise. She dodged sensitively and grabbed his hand in a panic. She kissed his chiseled jaw and rubbed it intimately. "My lord husband." She gently called out. Her eyes were as gentle as water, and her gaze moved. The softest part of his heart was ruthlessly and accurately struck. In an instant, one side collapsed. "Are you satisfied?" She wrapped her arms around his shoulders as a flattering smile appeared on her face. "Tonight, I'll let you off." When he opened his mouth, It was an extra-legal benevolence. Xianxia cupped his handsome face and kissed it. He hugged her and placed her on the bed. Then he kissed her forehead and said, "I'll take a shower first. You sleep first." "I haven't showered either." "Together?" "No." Her face heated up, and she rejected him on the spot. Wouldn't she be digging her own grave if she took a shower with him? Otherwise, when she wiped the gun and caught fire, the shower would become an impure one. This man was full of energy as if he never knew fatigue. However, she was really tired. Once her head hit the pillow, sleepiness overwhelmed her, and she fell asleep in the next second. "Then you go shower first." He patted her butt and ordered her to take a shower first. Chapter 13:06. It looked like she had really put in a lot of effort to guard against him. Wuxia curled his lips and smiled. He found it interesting. Finally, when he came out of the shower, this little woman was lying quietly on the bed, lazily resting her head on her arm. She had already fallen asleep. He got off the bed gently. First he propped himself up, glanced at her, then reached out and pulled her into his embrace. She occupied his entire body. Hugging her, he lowered his head to look at her lazy and charming posture as she slept. Only then did the man smile comfortably. Only when he hugged her, the feeling that she belonged to him felt more real. Wuxia reached out his fingers with interest and gently caressed her soft and smooth cheeks. His long fingers gently circled her silky black hair a few times, twirling it around his fingertips. He played with it, but no matter how much he played, he couldn't get enough of it. He lowered his head and gently kissed her face. "You're mine." He leaned against her ear and said these words in a deep voice. In her sleep, she seemed to be a little disturbed. She lazily reached out her hand to brush it away, but he held it with one hand. He looked deeply at her. Just looking at her sleeping face like this gave him an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. This was probably what he meant by having it. To be able to hug her to sleep, and to be able to see her sleepy face when she woke up, this kind of lifestyle was something he had never imagined. It was a little unreal, but now it was happening right in front of him. This gave him a deep and powerful sense of belonging. She belonged to him. And he belonged to her too. He stretched out his arm and let her rest her head on it. He also laid down and hugged her waist. Just like that, they fell into a dream together. The next day, when Xianxia woke up, it was already morning. She didn't know when, but the side of the bed was empty. He left without a sound. Xianxia's heart suddenly felt empty. When she completely woke up from her hazy sleep, she realized that he must have gone to the office. She got up, walked to the window, and pulled open the curtains. The sun was shining brightly outside. Today was a good day, with blue skies and white clouds. The capital had not seen such clear weather in a long time. Along with it, her mood after waking up earlier had also become much brighter. Xianxia entered the bathroom. After washing up, she walked out of the room and saw Yu walking out with a basket of clean clothes. Yu looked at her, smiled slightly, and his eyes softened. "Mommy, you woke up so early?" "Yes. Daddy left early in the morning. He must have gone to the company." Xianxia nodded and suddenly glared at him. "You? Xianxia looked at the clothes basket in his hand with some astonishment. "Washing clothes?" Yu explained. I woke up early today and had nothing to do, so I washed the clothes. Right now, I'm planning to go out and dry them." Xianxia smiled and immediately said, "Mommy will dry them with you, okay?" "No need. Mommy's hand is injured, right? Since you're seriously injured, you should rest well." As Yu spoke, he glanced at the bandages on her wound, and his heart ached. Xianxia's heart warmed. Her little warm boy was always so considerate. Chapter 13:07. He pouted and blew gently with his little pink mouth. Transparent bubbles swelled up from the blowpipe and then floated in the air. Under the light of the sun, they refracted colorful illusions. Yu had made this blowpipe for fun when he was young. He used very simple tools to make a simple blowpipe. When Yu woke up, Xianxia was also awake. He stood by the side and watched as Yu cleaned the house and washed the clothes. His injuries had not healed yet, and he did not know how to do housework. There was nothing he could do to help, so he stood by the side helplessly. Yu rummaged through the cabinets and took out a toy that he had made in the past. He also poured some soap water into it and let Xianxia blow on it. Blowing bubbles was a childhood memory for many children. Yu rarely went out when he was young. He liked to lie on the windowsill and blow bubbles with his self-made blowpipe. He specially modified it and used the blowpipe he made to blow bubbles. They were big and round. To Xianxia, this toy was extremely rare. He was addicted to playing with it. He sat on the flower bed and played with it with great interest. He felt that it was very interesting. He had never played with this toy when he was young. It was simple but interesting. Especially when he saw the big bubbles that he blew floating in the wind. He felt an inexplicable sense of accomplishment. Yu, quick look. I blew a big bubble. Xianxia suddenly shouted excitedly. Unforgettable giggled and Xianxia was instantly alerted. He looked up abruptly and saw that it was her. He ran over happily. Mommy, you're awake? Unforgettable squatted down and patted his head. Yes. Xianxia, good morning. Xianxia snorted and glanced at her with disdain. Humph. Good morning? The sun is already shining on your butt. Mommy is such a lazy pig. Unforgettable was a little embarrassed. Muyi-chen, are you asking for a beating? How dare he call Mommy a lazy pig? Then you're a lazy pig. Stupid and lazy. Yu was displeased. She placed her hands on her hips and scolded him. How dare he call Mommy a lazy pig? This brat was itching for a beating. Xianxia pursed his lips and chuckled. Then, he hooked his arm around Unforgettable arm and handed her the jar of soapy water. Mommy, do you want to play too? Blow bubbles with me. Yu was speechless. Mommy, ignore him. Humph. You're not even playing with me. Xianxia poked his little finger, feeling wronged. Yu rolled her eyes coldly. I have to dry the clothes. I don't have time to play with you. Then Mommy, let's play without him. Xianxia smiled mischievously like a mischievous little elf. Unforgettable nodded and let him hold her hand as they ran to the flower bed to play. Yu stared at Unforgettable and Xianxia as they stood in the flower bed. From time to time, he could hear the sounds of laughter. What about him? He held a clothes rack in one hand and clean clothes in the other. He sat there doing manual labor and couldn't help but feel a little angry. Humph, however, in the blink of an eye, a smile appeared at the corner of his lips. The sun was bright and clear, and the laughter made his mood exceptionally cheerful. To him, this was a simple little happiness. Chapter 1308. The black Bentley slowly drove into Mu Group's private hospital. The hospital director was already waiting at the entrance with a row of people. The car door opened and Wuxia stepped out. The hospital director immediately led a group of people to greet him enthusiastically. It was as if the stars were surrounding the moon. Chairman Mu. We've been waiting for you for a long time. The hospital director smiled flatteringly. More than an hour later, Minyu called. At that time, the hospital director was still immersed in some gentle village. When he heard that a big shot from the Mu family was coming and asked him to wait, he quickly dressed up and rushed to the scene. The medical industry was a lucrative industry. Most of the medical centers and private hospitals in the country were controlled by the Mu Group. As for Mingda Hospital, it was the most famous private hospital in the capital. The hospital director, Li Changda, was able to sit in this position because he was promoted by the Mu family. Therefore, he served the Mu family like they were emperors. Wuxia glanced at him and asked calmly, "Where is she?" He did not bother with small talk and went straight to the point. The hospital director reacted for a few seconds and his face froze. She? May I know who you're referring to? Li Changda. I heard that a few days ago, my fourth uncle arranged for a woman to be admitted to the hospital. I'm here to see her. The hospital director was stunned for a while. He had not been in the hospital for the past few days, so naturally, he did not know the situation. The department director behind him immediately came forward and whispered a few words in his ear. He roughly told him what had happened in the hospital over the past few days. The hospital director immediately added, "Chairman Mu, are you talking about the patient that fourth uncle arranged to be admitted to the hospital a few days ago?" Yes. Wuxia seemed to have lost his patience. His voice was low and deep. The hospital director's heart skipped a beat. He said in a trembling voice, She's been controlled. Chairman Mu, I'll send someone to bring you there." With that, Everyone followed behind him like stars surrounding the moon as they made their way to the hospital building. The psychiatric inpatient building. On the third floor, Wuxia walked through a long corridor. Then, everyone stopped at the door of Ward 5. Open the door. The psychiatric ward was different from other wards. It had a wooden door, and when the door was opened, an iron gate appeared. Wuxia stood at the door. Through the tightly shut iron gate and the crisscrossing iron bars, he could clearly see the scene in the ward. The layout of the ward was quite simple. The walls were painted white, and there was a window that was tightly sealed with iron bars. The window and door were tightly shut, leaving only an air vent. In the empty ward, there was nothing else except for a single bed. Beside the bed, Mu Wanru leaned against the bedside with her hair disheveled. Her pair of wide and empty eyes stared blankly out of the window. Her originally beautiful hair was now as messy as a ball of withered grass. He didn't know what kind of stains were stuck on his hair, but it looked very dirty. Chapter 1309. From time to time, she would even knock her head against the wall. Compared to the noble Mu Wanru she used to be, the current her was a stark contrast. Wuxia took a step forward and stood outside the iron bars. He looked at the dazed Mu Wanru in the ward and frowned. He held his breath and focused his mind. Finally, he could make out the words that she was muttering. Child, 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 child. Mu Wanru's cracked lips opened and closed incessantly. It was as if she had been possessed as she kept repeating these broken words. It was as if she was possessed by a demon. She twirled her hair with both hands. From time to time, she would pull and break her hair. Then, she would pull another strand of hair. Her fingers were trembling as she twisted and broke her hair. She kept repeating these actions as if she had lost all sense of pain. Ha ha, child, child, my child. So miserable. So miserable. She gripped her hair in grief. She was numb as if she had gone mad. Wuxia looked at her coldly and glanced at the medical staff behind him. What's wrong with her? Minyu frowned and said, Boss, I heard that when she was sent to the hospital, her mental state was already very bad. After being locked in the ward for a few days, she became crazy. He raised his eyebrows and made a further judgment. Crazy. Yes, crazy. Minyu nodded and gave him a response. Was she really crazy? Wuxia narrowed his eyes in disgust. This woman's face was already annoying to begin with. Now that she looked like this, it was even more detestable. Could it be that this woman was up to something again? Was she pretending to be crazy? Unexpectedly, the moment he finished speaking, he alarmed the person in the ward. Mu Wanru raised her head abruptly. When she saw that it was Wuxia, she was stunned for a moment. She stopped her rambling and straightened her back when she saw him. The pair of empty eyes finally regained some focus, but they stared at him like the venomous snakes on the branches of a tropical rainforest. Wuxia looked expressionlessly at the pair of eyes that were wide open as if she had died with a grievance. Narrowing his eyes, he saw her suddenly stand up and huddle in a corner for a long time. As soon as she stood up, her body swayed and she fell to the ground again. Her head hit the headboard, but she didn't cry out in pain. It was as if she was really numb to pain. Then, she scrambled to get up from the ground and stared at him again. Suddenly, she tilted her head and smiled foolishly. She pursed her lips and shrunk into a corner, pressing herself against the wall. It was as if the person standing in front of her was a terrifying monster. Who are you? Wuxia narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Mu Wanru, don't play dumb with me. Mu Wanru didn't seem to understand what he said. She clumsily said a few words, as if she was struggling to digest his words. Then, like a child with low intelligence, she bit her lips. Did you see my child? Wuxia pursed his thin lips into a proud line and raised his eyebrows. Child. I know. Chapter 1310. Wuxia furrowed his brows and turned his head sideways to cast a sidelong glance at his assistant, who was standing behind him, with a complicated expression. What's wrong with her? The nurse next to him carefully observed his expression and said, Chairman Mu, this patient seems to have suffered a lot of trauma earlier and has some mental problems. In short, she had lost her mind. When Mu Wanru heard someone addressing her as Chairman Mu, it was as if the pain in the deepest part of her memory was suddenly evoked. She let out a tragic scream and suddenly stretched out her hands toward him. Her 10 fingers were stiff and twisted as they tightened. Asha. Aja, is that you? Aja, is that you? She suddenly pulled up the corners of her lips, revealing an extremely strange smile. She laughed bitterly a few times, but immediately after, she let out a mournful and sorrowful cry. She cried for a while, then laughed for a while. Suddenly, she screamed and jumped up from the ground. Her feet staggered, and she almost fell as she threw herself towards the door. Bam! Her body in the iron gate made a loud noise. Mu Wanru held the iron gate tightly and struggled to reach out her hand through the gap, throwing herself at him. Minyu immediately put an arm in front of Mu Yaja and separated him from her. Boss, back off. Be careful that she doesn't hurt you. Ha ha ha. Mu Wanru suddenly let out a series of earth-shattering and shrill laughter. Her eyes widened ferociously as she stared at Mu Yaja's figure. Her face was like a withered flower and she looked like a malicious spirit that had crawled out from hell. It was terrifying and sinister. Aja, I've been waiting for you here for so long.
You're here. Are you here to take me away? Are you finally here to take me away?
Without waiting for a response, she cried and laughed at the same time. I've been waiting for you for so long.
It's been so tiring. Take me away, okay?
Suddenly, she fell silent and carefully looked around as if she didn't see the person standing beside Mu Yaja. She lowered her voice and said, "The people here are all demons. They abuse me, they hit me, they put me under house arrest, they torture me.
Can you take me away from here?"
All right. Mu Wanru's eyes suddenly lit up and said mysteriously, "Sha."
I have good news for you.
Mu Yaja looked at her extremely ugly face and asked coldly, "What good news?"
Hee. I'm pregnant.
Haha.
I'm pregnant. Do you know that? I'm pregnant.
Mu Wanru suddenly, as if she had gone mad, to her face was filled with joy. Her entire face was twisted with joy.
I'm pregnant.
God, I've never thought that I would have my own child in my life. Which quack dared to say that I'm infertile?
His dog eyes must be blind.
All of a sudden, her face froze for a moment before turning pale again.
But, where's the child? The child is missing. Why is the child missing?
I can't find him.
Can you help me find the child?
That's our child. He's going to be the head of the Mu family in the future and the successor of the Mu group. When that time comes, I'll be able to become the mistress of the Mu family because of my son, right?
Chapter 13:11. Our child.
Mu Yaja smiled playfully and cruelly said, "That's not our child." Mu Wanru was startled. The smile on her face froze in an instant.
Yes.
That's not our child. Mu Wanru suddenly lowered her head guiltily. From time to time, she carefully looked up at his face.
That's not our child.
You know it. She was extremely guilty. Her hands helplessly twisted her messy hair with a conflicted look on her face. That child is mine and Aaron's. Yes, it's mine and Aaron's.
Yes.
You're blaming me, aren't you? She suddenly raised her head and looked at his cold face. Her breathing became urgent.
You're blaming me, aren't you?
Yes, I betrayed you.
Yes, I know. I shouldn't have betrayed you.
I slept with a man.
It's so dirty. I feel so dirty too.
With that, she began to rub her body hard.
Mu Yaja's face was cold.
He lowered his head and looked at her, unmoved. Mu Wanru's voice trembled as she started to speak incoherently.
So, you're angry. You're angry with me. You blame me for betraying you, so you snatched my child, right?
But I know that I'm wrong.
I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have betrayed you.
I shouldn't have poisoned Grandpa's medicine.
I shouldn't have snatched Xianxia's jade.
Yes.
It's because that jade is beautiful. I like it, but I shouldn't have snatched it.
Mu Wanru grabbed the metal bars again and stared at him with wide eyes.
I shouldn't have sent people to kill Xianxia and Yunti on you.
Yes.
So you're angry. Don't be angry, okay? Let me off and return my child to me. I'm wrong.
Mu Yaja remained silent. Mu Wanru was even more anxious now. She reached out her hand and scratched in his direction with all her might.
Aja, is my child with you? Did you hide my child? Return it to me. Return it to me, okay?
She mumbled that she wanted the child. Mu Yaja asked without turning his head, "Where's her child?" The nurse said, "She just had a miscarriage. The child is gone. The child is gone." Her words were, without a doubt, a greater provocation to Mu Wanru. When she heard this, she was like an ignited explosive. She went into a frenzy. She grabbed the metal bars with both hands and tugged at it. "You're lying. You're lying. My child is still alive. My child. Give me back my child. Give me back my child." Oh! The mournful screams echoed and tore through the long corridor. Mu Wanru screamed at the top of her lungs. Due to her excessive agitation and anger, her face had turned the color of a pig's liver. She seemed to have gone crazy as she bawled at the top of her lungs. "Return! Give me my child. Mu Yaja, you're the one who killed my child. Return my child to me. If not, I won't let you off even if I become a ghost." Minyu was furious and scolded, "You mad dog! Biting people for no reason." The nurse on duty hurried over and ordered everyone to stand back. She then opened the door. Mu Wanru was about to rush out when the nurse picked up a pillow and gently said, "Your child is here?" Chapter 13:12. Mu Wanru was called back to her senses. She turned around in a daze and her gaze fell on the pillow in the nurse's arms. It was a soft, white pillow. Mu Wanru's eyes widened in an instant. Then, she rushed over ecstatically and snatched the pillow from the nurse's arms. Child, my baby!" The moment Mu Wanru hugged the pillow, she retracted her sharp aura. A motherly gentleness appeared on her face, and her eyes became docile. "Baby." Sob, "Mommy misses you so much." The medical staff behind her looked at each other. Taking advantage of this moment, they quickly rushed forward and swiftly gave her a dose of tranquilizer. Mu Wanru's body trembled violently. Then, her eyes rolled back and her entire body went limp. A few doctors and nurses worked together to lift her onto the bed. Then they went out and locked the door. From the beginning to the end, Mu Yaja's face was expressionless. He only looked coldly at the crazy woman. Under the influence of the tranquilizer, she was quiet. However, she still hugged the pillow tightly in her arms and refused to let go. There was no doubt that this person had gone crazy. At first, he wondered if she was playing some trick and pretending to be crazy in front of him. But now he was sure. This woman had gone completely insane. Moreover, he was quite crazy. What exactly triggered her? According to the attending doctor, the patient has been living in fear for a long time and suffered a heavy blow overnight. As a result, he developed a serious mental disorder. Minyu responded to his suspicions. That day, after Mu Wanru woke up, she found out that her child was not saved. It had suffered a miscarriage and even her uterus had been removed. It wasn't easy for her to have a child, but it was gone. This caused Mu Wanru so much pain that she had some self-mutilating behavior. After coming out of the operating room, her condition became more and more unstable. She kept asking for a child. It seemed that she couldn't accept the pain of losing a child. She was pitiful and hateful. Mu Yaja slowly turned around and was about to leave when he saw a figure at the end of the corridor. At the end of the corridor, Mu Lianjue was leaning on a cane with someone supporting him. His back was against the light, so his expression could not be seen clearly. Mu Yaja was stunned. Then, coldness and hatred appeared in his eyes. He raised his head and strode toward him. When he reached Mu Lianjue, Mu Yaja stopped in his tracks and coldly lowered his head to look down at him from above. His face was cold and sinister. Fourth Mu's fourth brother. The moment he spoke, his voice seemed to freeze 1,000 miles of ice. He directly addressed him as Mu Si, not intending to give him any face at all. Mu Lianjue's body trembled slightly as he raised his head to look at him. In the next second, Mu Yaja suddenly reached out and grabbed his throat with his strong and broad palm. He exerted so much force that one could faintly hear a few weak joints groaning. Mu Lianjue was caught off guard by his sudden move. The cane in his hand fell to the ground with a thud. Grabbing him by the throat, Mu Yaja pushed him hard and pinned him against the wall. Chapter 13:13. Mu Lianjue did not even have the time to react before he was pinned down by the other. He heard Mu Yaja call him by his name without any honorifics. Fourth Mu. That was a title that only someone of Mu Linfeng's seniority could address him by. It was clear that Mu Yaja did not intend to give him any face. The moment Mu Yaja saw him, icy fury surged in his heart, and he could not restrain it. This man was too much of a bully.
What did he take him for?
Did he really think that just because he didn't show his power, he could play with him in the palm of his hand without fear?
What a joke.
Look at what kind of shady business he had done behind his back. He did not execute him immediately back then because Second Master Mu was there to stop him. He was busy looking for Yu back then, so he was not in the mood to deal with him. Look at what he had done now. He actually sent an assassin to kill a 7-year-old child. Mu Wanru had lost her mind because of the shock of losing her child. What about him? He could see that this old fart had also gone insane.
Mu Lianjue was choked by him.
The veins on his forehead bulged as his blood rushed to the top of his head.
Due to suffocation, his eyeballs bulged out.
Mu Yaja. What are you doing? He struggled to spit out a few words from his throat and looked at him angrily. Did he know that what he was doing was treacherous? In terms of seniority, Mu Yaja should respectfully address him as fourth uncle. He was his elder, after all. He, Mu Lianjue, had a prominent and honorable position in the Mu family. He went up to him and grabbed his neck without saying a word. He looked angry and called him Fourth Mu. This was more than just treason, this was practically a rebellion? Who gave him the guts to do that? Mu Yaja glared at him coldly. His eyes were bloodshot and full of murderous intent. Mu Lianjue could see the terrifying murderous intent in his eyes. It was real murderous intent. It was not just anger. Mu Lianjue's heart was filled with nervousness and fear. He had never seen such a terrifying expression on Mu Yaja's usually cold and calm face. It was as if he was an ancient king who had been angered and turned violent. His pair of cold and sharp eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. What are you doing? Frightened, Mu Lianjue gripped Mu Yaja's wrist tightly with both hands and began to pry his fingers apart. The Mu family had an illustrious background. The Muse would be arranged to serve in the military when they were young. Just like Mu Lianjue, he had also undergone harsh training in the military when he was younger. Even though he was getting on in years, he still had strength in his hands. However, the current Mu Yaja was at the peak of his anger. All the strength in his body seemed to have condensed in this hand that was choking his neck. No matter how hard he struggled and tried to break free, it was all in vain.
Mu Lianjue felt increasingly suffocated.
His eyelids twitched uncontrollably as he gasped for air. Mu Yaja's grip tightened, as if he could snap his fragile throat in the next second. I've lost my last bit of patience with you.
Mu Yaja sneered evilly.
His eyes were like the tip of a cold knife as they landed on the man's face, causing him to feel a sharp pain.
Chapter 13-14.
D*mu Mu Lianjue. As soon as he said that, Mu Yaja tightened his grip on his neck. In the next second, he felt the world spinning before his eyes. The excruciating pain in his throat cut off all possibility of breathing. He could only feel that his throat was so fragile that it could not withstand a single blow from the other, and would be crushed in the next instant. This brat was bent on putting him to death. He did not leave any way out at all. How heartless! Was he so heartless that he would strangle his fourth uncle to death for a woman and AB** stod from who knows? It was as if he could hear the joints in his throat creaking as they tightened. Cough, cough. Mu Lianjue gradually lost his strength and could no longer struggle. Madness. This was madness. Mu Lianjue glanced at him, only to see a version of Mu Yaja he had never seen before. One was cold, heartless, and exuded a sharp, murderous aura from head to toe. Mu Yaja glared at him with bloodshot eyes. His pair of dark eyes seemed to be filled with a thick fog of viciousness. It was as if he could topple the mountains and overturn the seas and swallow him whole. Minyu hurried over from behind, only to be stunned by this scene. Realizing that things were not looking good, he hurried forward to calm Mu Yaja down. Boss, what are you doing? Mu Yaja was not in the mood to respond to him. He only stared coldly at Mu Lianjue's face. The evil and heartless expression on his face made Mu Lianjue's heart sink into an ice cellar. No, I don't want to die. I can't die.
Mu Lianjue kicked him with all his might.
However, even when those heavy kicks landed on Mu Yaja's calf, the latter's posture remained cold and still. It was as if he did not care about his attacks at all. Minyu panicked and went forward to stop him. He knew very well that although this was a private property under the Mu Group, it was still related to the medical industry and was closely linked to the government. No matter how powerful and influential the Mu family was, if someone were to die here, it would be an unimaginable blow to the Mu family.
Minyu was puzzled.
In his mind, his boss had always been calm and astute, and he was able to clearly distinguish between personal grudges and benefits.
So, why was he so agitated right now that he'd completely forgotten where he was?
Although Mingde Hospital was under the Mu family's name, there were many mouthpieces of the government in the hospital.
He shouldn't have done that. However, Minyu was wrong about one thing.
Since Mu Yaja dared to do this, he must have a way to suppress this matter. Even if he personally dealt with Mu Lianjue in front of everyone in this hospital today, he still had the ability to control the situation.
He wasn't afraid of killing anyone.
Moreover, as the successor of the Mu family, he had experienced a lot of light and also a lot of darkness. He could be so ruthless because he was not afraid at all.
He had the ability to kill Mu Lianjue without causing a stir.
Once he hardened his heart, not to mention Mu Lianjue, even if he had to go head-to-head with someone like Mu Linfeng, he would be fearless.
No one could do anything to him. Chapter 13:15.
Mu Lianjue had violated so many of his rights and trespassed on so many forbidden grounds, yet he still looked at ease when he met him. Did he not know that the reason why he was so calm and unhurried was that he was confident that he would not dare to do anything to him because he was his fourth uncle? Or was he so sure that he had a certain status in the Mu family that he naively thought that he would not dare to do anything to him?
Minyu panicked when he saw that Mu Lianjue's breathing was getting shorter and shorter.
His face had turned red, and the veins on his forehead were about to pop out.
He was so anxious that he broke out in cold sweat. Could it be that the boss was really going to kill someone?
Thus, he braced himself and went forward to stop him.
"Boss, calm down. Don't get angry, lest the harmony in the family is damaged." Mu Yaja easily pushed him aside with one hand.
"Get lost." Just as he was about to lose his wits after being pushed aside, an angry bellow was heard from behind him.
"Are you crazy? Stop it." It was Mu Linfeng's voice.
Mu Yaja frowned slightly and glanced back from the corner of his eye. While he was distracted, Mu Lianjue mustered all his strength and finally broke free from him. He fell to the side and hugged his neck as he coughed and gasped for air.
Cough, cough.
Cough, cough, cough. Mu Lianjue could not stop coughing. When he raised his head to look at Mu Yaja, he looked as if he had seen a ghost and could not help but retreat backward. He was old. It was difficult for him to fight against him. Mu Yaja turned around and bumped into Mu Linfeng. Mu Linfeng, who was dressed in a well-ironed military uniform, slowly walked toward him, his footsteps like a gust of wind. He was different from the others. Mu Yaja had only trained in the army when he was young. Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, had been in the army since he was 10 years old. In a sense, he had devoted his life to power. Strictly speaking, he was the real power behind the Mu family and had toyed with it for most of his life. Now that the Mu family had developed to this point, they were naturally no longer just a wealthy family in the business world. With such a large family, they were involved in both legal and illegal activities. The one who represented the legal side was naturally the head of the capital's military, Mu Linfeng. Moreover, his wife was from a powerful family. Hence, the power in his hands, even Mu Yaja, was not to be underestimated. Mu Linfeng came to the hospital today to prescribe some medicine. He had some old ailments. While he was at it, to meet Mu Lianjue and make some arrangements. Mu Linfeng knew his nephew well. He was a hot-blooded man. Mu Lianjue had done so many taboo things. His nephew would definitely not let him off so easily. Once the dust settled, he would definitely offend Mu Lianjue. Be it through open means or underhanded means, he would definitely settle this score. If things went wrong, Mu Lianjue's old life would be lost. Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, cared about their brotherhood. Perhaps at his age, he was no longer so high-spirited and emotional. He was worried that Mu Yaja would secretly deal with Mu Lianjue, so he asked him to go abroad for a period of time to avoid the limelight. He came to the hospital to check on Mu Wanru's condition and to understand the situation from the doctor. Chapter 13:16. Thankfully, he had appeared in time and stopped him in time. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to think further. From the earlier scene, Mu Linfeng had indirectly experienced how ruthless his nephew could be. Mu Yaja looked at him with a lukewarm expression. "Second uncle, why are you here?"
"You're crazy." "How impudent." "Are you crazy?" What were you trying to do earlier?
Nothing.
Mu Yaja sneered.
It's been so many years.
Some old grudges should be settled with someone, right?
Nonsense.
Mu Linfeng was flustered and exasperated.
He was about to say something when he suddenly paused and looked around with a warning look in his eyes.
When Min Yu saw this, he naturally understood what he meant. He immediately cleared the crowd and left the stage himself. At this point, only the uncle and nephew were left in the corridor. After everyone left, Mu Linfeng glared at him.
Don't mess around.
Yaja, he's your fourth uncle and your elder. Do you think it's appropriate for you to do this? No matter what he did wrong, he's still your elder. What you did earlier was simply disgraceful.
Mu Yaja's face turned cold. Why, second uncle?
From your tone, it sounds like you're trying to absolve fourth Mu.
Mu Linfeng retorted. Fourth Mu, is that a title you have the right to call him?
You should respectfully call him fourth uncle. Don't be rude. What you did was disgraceful.
Second uncle, you're the one who has no right to interfere in the grudge between me and fourth Mu.
Mu Yaja sneered. This time, he didn't give Mu Linfeng any face. In short, he didn't give him a way out.
Mu Linfeng almost fainted from his insolent tone.
Do you still have any respect for your elders? Do you still have any manners?
Mu Linfeng's temper flared as he scolded without any grace.
You must remember that he's your elder and you're his junior. No matter what he did wrong, it's not up to you to act rashly here. Do you understand?
Second uncle, are you going to interfere in this matter to the end?
I don't know what you're talking about. I won't interfere with you, but you have to be clear about the difference in status. I don't want to see what just happened again.
Mu Yaja looked at him deeply. His eyes were cold and the corners of his thin lips lifted slightly.
However, he asked a question that pierced one's heart. It seems that second uncle is determined to protect him. His tone was incomparably gloomy, causing people to tremble with fear. Mu Linfeng was furious.
At the same time, he looked into Mu Yaja's eyes, which were unfathomable.
Second uncle, aren't you afraid of hurting our friendship by doing this?
Mu Linfeng clenched his fists and took a deep breath before saying, if the family is harmonious, everything will prosper. As soon as he said that, Mu Yaja chuckled softly and coldly. It was as if this sentence was the biggest joke to him.
Your words are truly laughable and lamentable. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes and walked up to Mu Linfeng.
He lowered his head slightly and cast a cold glance at the latter's face from the corner of his eyes.
If the family is harmonious, everything will prosper.
You, Mu Yaja suddenly asked. Second uncle, you should be aware of what happened more than 10 years ago, right?
Chapter 13:17. Mu Yaja, on the other hand, caught too many chilling things from his face. He continued to ask, you know the details of my father's car accident and my mother's death, don't you? Mu Linfeng did not say anything.
Mu Yaja continued coldly. So what am I to you?
I'm just a pawn.
You.
Calm down.
I'm very calm.
Mu Yaja closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were so cold that it made one's heart palpitate.
I'm very calm.
Mu Linfeng's heart sank when he saw this. With a pale face he explained, about your father's car accident more than a decade ago, if I had foreseen it, I would have stopped it. But I was only aware of that matter in hindsight. Upon hearing this, Mu Yaja's lips tugged expressionlessly into a half-smile. Fourth bro is indeed muddle-headed in this matter. However, it's been more than a decade. Since he's let it go, you should let it go too, shouldn't you? Now that you have the entire Mu group, why do you have to care about the past? It's been so many years. Let's just settle it.
Mu Yaja laughed.
Settle it? After more than 10 years, such a huge blood feud could be resolved with just a few words.
Mu Yaja smiled and replied coldly, sure.
Mu Linfeng looked at him in surprise, only to hear him say sinisterly, if you want it to be settled, you'll have to pay with your life. After saying that, he turned around and walked away. Mu Linfeng stood rooted to the ground in a daze. He understood what Mu Yaja's words meant. He was definitely going to use Mu Lianjue's life to settle this debt. Mu Lianjue stood up shakily, his face as pale as wax.
Second brother. Fourth bro, look at you, you've incurred this debt.
Why did you do such a foolish thing back then? Mu Linfeng glared at him in exasperation. Mu Lianjue's face paled. If it was in the past, he would definitely have said in an old-fashioned manner, "Humph, that lad definitely won't dare to do anything to me." However, after what happened just now, he could clearly see the murderous intent in Mu Yaja's eyes. Now, he did not dare to say such a thing no matter what. Second brother, don't you understand me? Why did you do that back then? You've seen it too. You've seen it clearly. In terms of ability and skill, am I any worse than Lianqing? I'm only more outstanding. However, how did that old fart make such a decision? The Mu family's inheritance's position. But in the end, it's given to Lianqing. I can't accept this. Can you accept it? Even though you don't say anything on the surface, you're still indignant deep down. Mu Linfeng fell silent. In the dim corridor, against the light, two elders in their 50s stood facing each other, but they could not see each other's faces. Chapter 13:18. He coughed violently when he got agitated and then said hoarsely, I didn't do that purely for my own benefit. I did it for the Mu group. I can't do it. I can't watch the Mu family's empire fall into the hands of a piece of trash in just one night. That's our blood, sweat, and tears. I won't allow him to trample on it. Enough. Mu Linfeng sighed as if he had lost all his strength. That matter is already in the past. I don't want to pursue it anymore. Fourth bro, you should stop now. Second brother, what should I do now? You can't leave me alone. Mu Linfeng looked at him and sighed faintly. Fourth bro, when we were young, I could tell that you were the most utilitarian among us. You were the most ambitious. I admit that among the brothers, your ability is considered to be quite outstanding. I won't deny it. But the ridiculous things you've done are too much. Mu Lianjue gritted his teeth. I was young and impetuous back then. I just couldn't accept it. I couldn't accept it. That's why I wanted to let that old man have a taste of the pain of losing his most beloved things one by one. That's enough, shut up. Mu Linfeng turned around. After a moment of silence he suddenly said, Later, I'll send someone to protect you and arrange a flight to America for you as soon as possible. Lie low for now while you're abroad. You can come back when I summon you. I know. He was indignant, but there was nothing he could do now. He had lost this war. As a loser, he had nothing left and his momentum was gone. Now, he could only lie low abroad. Mu Yaja received a call from Mu Linfeng when he returned to the office. When he picked up the call, he went straight to the point. There's something I want to tell you. I'll be frank with you. I'm protecting fourth bro. If you want to give second uncle face, don't touch him. Otherwise, it'll hurt the harmony in the family. Although Mu Linfeng's tone was firm and left no room for negotiation, it was rare for him to lower his stance in front of him. After weighing the pros and cons, Mu Linfeng decided to ease the tension with Mu Yaja. When Mu Yaja heard this, he sneered. Second uncle, do you need to report your decisions to me? Yaja. Everything should come to an end. Let bygones be bygones. Heh. Second uncle is also responsible for this matter. If second uncle had anticipated your fourth uncle's ambition, he would have taken precautions. You should understand that second uncle values the unity of the family and doesn't like to split up. I also feel very regretful and sad about your father's death. I am also very angry with your fourth uncle. Very angry. However, some of his methods are too much and it seems unreasonable. What is a favor? Second uncle, how can you talk about favors with me in the Mu family? In such a big Mu family, there is only the cold struggle for power. What is there to talk about? How laughable. How pathetic. Just like a person who drinks water, only he knows whether it is hot or cold. Perhaps, in Mu Linfeng's eyes, Mu Lianqing's death was just a trivial matter that could be summed up with a simple word of regret. It was as if a single word from him could float away with the wind. Every step in the rich family was treacherous. A single mistake could lead to eternal damnation. The struggle for power was never-ending. Even though he knew this, he still could not forget the pain. The pain that almost destroyed him. Chapter 13:19. Mu Linfeng fell silent. The silence was so long that just as Mu Yaja was about to hang up the call, he heard his uncle's heavy and powerless voice. What do you want me to do for you to be magnanimous? Mu Yaja's voice sank as he retracted his smile. His cold voice sounded apathetic. Be magnanimous. Second uncle, you must be joking. What kind of tone is that? Yaja, is this the attitude you should have toward your elders? I'm your second uncle. Don't be too arrogant and insufferably arrogant. Mu Lianjue flew into a rage out of humiliation at his indifference. Yaja, consider it as giving your second uncle some face. For the sake of our family's bloodline, at least don't be so ruthless. He's your fourth uncle after all. The same blood flows in his veins. Mu Yaja had completely lost his patience with him and was disgusted with his uncle's haughty attitude. He snorted coldly. Aren't you overestimating your own status by saying that? Mu Linfeng was deeply stunned on the other end of the line. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect this lad to speak to him in such a manner. In the past, he would never speak to him in such a manner. While he was in a daze, Mu Yaja mercilessly retorted, It's hard to say who's giving face in this matter. I've already made up my mind. If second uncle insists on protecting him from me, you can try. You can try. What a boastful tone. Mu Linfeng was furious. An uncontrollable rage exploded in his chest as he scolded, Yaja, aren't you going overboard with your words? Don't forget who you're relying on to have your current status. Who did you rely on to be able to sit in the position of successor? Think about it again. Who are you relying on to become the head of the Mu family? Without me, can you have your current status? Don't even think about it. Don't forget how pathetic you would have been back then if it weren't for me. It was me who helped you to your current position. Hee hee. You're different now. Your wings have hardened, so you want to soar high, right? You're so arrogant that you won't give me any face, will you? Second uncle, don't forget that I owe you all these years, and it's about time I pay you back. Hee hee. You support me? The smile on Mu Yaja's face disappeared, and his eyes turned cold. Second uncle, I can't help but admire you for making use of me sound so dignified. Yes, you were the one who supported me, but did you think that I was able to sit in this position all because of you? Not necessarily. Not everyone can reach where they are today with your support. Back then, no matter who it was, no one would be able to replace my achievements today. Mu Linfeng's expression changed drastically as viciousness surfaced on his face. Mu Yaja paused and said with a mocking smile, Moreover, I should have paid back all the favors you've given me over the years. Have you forgotten? You can't do those dirty things with your status. Those dirty tricks that you couldn't complete were done by me. Why? Are you trying to erase this bit of credit with just a few words from you? Mu Linfeng questioned sternly. Then, what exactly do you want now? Chapter 13:20. When Mu Linfeng heard that, he was both furious and shocked. Firstly, it was because of Mu Yaja's arrogant tone. Secondly, it was because of the implied warning in his words. Mu Yaja had no intention of giving him any face at all. While he flew into a rage out of humiliation, he also felt a trace of lingering fear in his heart. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. How loyal were the people he had groomed for so many years to him? In the past, Mu Yaja had always been respectful toward his elders. Despite his arrogance, callousness and indifference, he was still very respectful toward the elders in the family. Now, however, from his words, Mu Linfeng could tell that he was actually being unreasonable and rebellious toward him. He couldn't help but wonder if he should teach him a lesson and teach him a lesson. With that thought in mind, his words became impolite. Haha, don't go overboard. Humph. You brat, you actually know how to argue with me, huh? Fine. Since you put it that way, I have nothing else to say. You settle your score, and I'll protect my people. If I can't protect them, it'll be because of your ability. However, let me say this first. Yaja, don't blame me for not reminding you when the time comes. What kind of consequences will your actions bring upon you? Don't you think it's time for you to examine the situation you're in now? You've just ascended to the position, and everyone in the family is suspicious of you. If you act rashly at this time, aren't you afraid of those gossips? When the time comes, if there are unfavorable rumors about you within the family, you'd better be careful not to lose your position as the head of the family. Second uncle, you should know me well enough. No one can stop me from doing what I want to do. It's either I don't do it. If I do, I won't leave a way out. I think it's best if you don't waste your efforts. Otherwise, I'll embarrass you when the time comes. His uncle warned him. In that case, he also gave him a piece of advice. Mu Linfeng gritted his teeth. You'll regret it. Mu Yaja coldly added. I've never regretted what I've done. Second uncle, you're overthinking it. With that, he cut off the line. On the other end, Mu Linfeng was so infuriated that he slammed the phone on the table and stood up abruptly. With his hands behind his back, he paced back and forth on the spot, clearly irritated. This brat's wings were really getting harder and harder. How could he say something like that? Mu Linfeng was furious. On the other end, Mu Yaja hung up the phone and pondered for a moment. As his second uncle, he was bound to protect his nephew. There was one thing that second uncle had nothing to say about. Thus, even though he had some disputes with Mu Lianjue when he was younger, he had let it go at this age. On account of their brotherhood, Mu Linfeng was naturally unwilling to watch the family members kill each other. If it were any other matter, Mu Yaja would not have brushed him off for his sake. However, this matter was out of the question. Putting aside the matter of Mu Lianjue harming his parents more than a decade ago, the thought of him sending trained assassins to kill Yu, for the sake of exterminating all of them, was intolerable. Who gave him the courage to touch his woman and son? Mu Yaja then made a call to a mysterious person. Chapter 13:21. When Lu Jinyu heard Mu Yaja's deep tone, he knew that this was not a small matter. Thus, he did not waste time on small talk and said forcefully, Chief, tell me. Mu Yaja knocked on the table and said in a deep voice, I want something, but it's not suitable for me to show my face with my current status. I need you to secretly give me the order. What is it? Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes and said word by word, I want a person's life. In the afternoon, Xianxia was coaxing the two children to read a script at home when she suddenly received a call from her father. Some time ago, he rushed back to his hometown to attend a funeral. It was said that his mother had passed away, so he hurried back. Later, he called to say that he would be observing mourning in his hometown for a period of time. He then reminded Xianxia to take care of herself at home. Xianxia also reminded him to take care of his health. The father-daughter pair usually kept in touch with each other, but this time, Xianxia had called to discuss something with her. Xia, it's like this. There's something I want to discuss with you. Dad, what's the matter? Do you still remember Uncle Yeho whom you met when you were young? Uncle Yeho, Yun Yeho, was Yun Yeqing's younger brother. Yun Yeqing's hometown was in a small county dozens of kilometers away from the capital. There was a backward village called Yun Family Village. The scenery there was picturesque, but due to its location, the village's economy had always been backward. Yun Yeqing had an elderly mother, an elder sister, and a younger brother. He had always been closer to his younger brother. When he was very young, his father passed away early due to a mining accident. His mother raised the three children single-handedly. When he was young, he entrusted his mother to his younger brother, Yun Yeho, and came to the city to make a living. When he was young, he was high-spirited and had a good head for business, so he worked hard to make a name for himself. At that time, he wanted to bring his mother and siblings to the city to enjoy life. In the end, his old mother was used to living in the countryside and refused. Yun Yeho, on the other hand, allowed Yun Yeqing to develop his career in the city with peace of mind. Since his mother was not in the city, it was only natural for him to stay at home and take care of her. Yun Lingru, on the other hand, could not wait to rush